Hello everyone and everywhere, whoever was or will be, I am Red Runner. This is going to be a little bit different from my average videos. Today, I'm going to be doing a ranking of the latest Death Battle season. It is a bit popular in the Death Battle community, and I didn't have any plans to make this. It was just sort of brought up to me by
me. And whatever these two guys next to us as well, but mostly me.
That's right, Hyper. Actually, no it isn't. It was my idea, you plagiarizing piece of shit. I will hunt you down anyway. This season is known for its blistering highs and equally blistering lows. But let's try to stay positive, because we're low on serotonin.
Yeah, like my fellow 3D admin was saying, we're gonna be looking at the season's highest highs and lowest of lows. If they're complete duds, or if there's something like Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen. We're still here to rank them.
In any case, this will be our collective ranking of the 10th anniversary season of Death Battle.
Basically, each of us will have our own personal ranking of the season, with each episode assigned with a point value between 1 and 16, with higher ranking episodes receiving more points.
The higher the score, the higher the ranking. It's a lot like, literally every sport ever, except golf, because no one likes that. Much like every other ranking in this godforsaken website, we're going to start at the very bottom, then work our way up. It's the ladder of opinions that no one likes. In the event of ties, we basically flip a coin. Or Speedy, whatever is convenient.
Okay, don't listen to him. We'll talk about it, we'll work it out which one we actually prefer as a group. And factors for the ranking can vary, but generally it's just how much we enjoyed the episodes themselves, not necessarily the animation, the analyses, but everything all together.
Can I still flip Speedy?
F*** off. That sums up the rules. If you disagree with our placements on certain episodes, that's perfectly fine. Not everyone is gonna have the same thoughts in this ranking.
Even if we have vastly different thoughts on certain episodes, some more justifiable than others. Speedy.
Why is it always me?
So with that out of the way, let's just get this started.
Before we begin this entry, I do want to stress that Death Battle is not a bad show, even when we dislike something about it. We're all pretty good friends with some of the people that work behind the scenes of the show. That's all the more reason why we can't just shy away from the stuff we don't like. Criticism should be welcomed and not pushed away. One cannot improve if the flaws are never acknowledged. That's just not how it works.
Now with that said... Yeah.
I do want to say that this was a close race for last place, but then I would be lying.
Frankly, I see this as one of the less interesting video game matchups, and that might be weird from you guys hearing that. At least fighting game related.
I really like Street Fighter. I really don't like Mortal Kombat. But regardless of how I feel about the series, I could still look at this product from an unbiased point of view and say, I don't like this. In the beginning of every episode, the hosts are there to describe the characters and how they connect and what's important about them. In this episode, they just say they're the final bosses in fighting games. And that's it. So, no matter how you feel about the matchup, you got to admit that it's kind of paper thin compared to other fighting game matchups of the same caliber. Even 4 final bosses, because Heihachi vs. Geese had more going on.
I would honestly say that Shao Kahn vs. M. Bison had more going for it, to be brutally honest.
Akuma had much more interesting options with Rao and stuff like that, and, well, I wasn't really a big... Okay, well, I really wasn't a big fan of it, but I still think it had some merit. It's just the execution wasn't really well done, in my opinion.
As someone who has always wanted this matchup since M. Bison vs. Shao Kahn, even I have to admit, the end result of this episode was lackluster to say the least. So I might be a little bit biased for some of my reasonings here, but yeah.
The analysis for both are, well, Akuma's is pretty good.
It's pretty detailed, has all the things you need to know about it, except his finger painting skills, which has been a running gag up to this point, and then just left for no reason. And Shao Kahn's exists.
I mean, with modern MK and how they've been treating Shao Kahn, just... yeah, it was the best they can really do.
But personally, I think the analysis were fine. It was nice of them to use different feats rather than reusing almost that we already heard before. That was refreshing, at least.
Once you see the fight, and then you see the storyboard, and then you realize something doesn't add up.
The fights. Okay, positives first. Phillips does a good job with Akuma. I like some of the shots in the fight. And
That's a really nice looking sand.
yeah, that's about it. And that's our first issue. Why is this in the desert? Literally, why? This just doesn't help the fight at all. It just only damages it. Like, they can't show off how powerful they are, so then the SFM team has to focus on what they clearly have shown what they're not so good with in a previous episode, hand to hand, which, well, granted, this was with a new software with Blender, and it could have maybe worked out in a different software if that other one wasn't so helpful, but no, that really didn't change anything.
Honestly, when you look at the end product, I don't think that the software that the fight was made on was the main issue. Taking a look at the storyboards, it seems like there's only one thing that really got in the way of this episode. Time constraints.
I'm actually going to kill you.
When you look into the storyboards, what we see is quite potentially a completely different fight, and that's because of the setting. What we have in the actual episode is just a desert, but in the storyboard, you got yourself a whole ass arena, and that changes a lot.
While I personally think the desert setting is fine, as it could be a reference to the MK stage back in MK3, I think, I will admit the setting would have been much better if it was in a tournament or something like that.
It would have made much more sense if it was in a tournament where he's talking down an opponent with people there. Here, he's mad at them for interrupting a tournament. Nobody is here to witness.
Speaking of the word talking in Shao Kahn, let's take a look at his voice actor. It's not great. Johnny usually does a phenomenal job voicing his roles in Death Battle, and for the most part, this should have seemed like a role that was right up his alley. But whether it was poor direction, or he just didn't put in his all, whatever the case, it just doesn't really click with me. I understand what it's going for, emulating the old Shao Kahn voice lines back in the arcade days, but that doesn't sound at all like those arcade lines, and it certainly doesn't sound like his modern portrayal, which I will give credit. Thank God it doesn't sound like his modern portrayal.
I don't fear you.
Speaking of, his modern MK look. It looks horrible. I mean, yeah, the face is disgusting, especially when it goes unmasked, and his overall design, look, and especially whenever he moves his mouth, is just not pretty to look at.
You just called the Emperor of Outworld ugly. You just looked at him and said, man, hey, your shoes are raggedy. You understand. He's going to kill you now, right? Like, you gotta go. Like, leave the recording studio. You gotta go.
Akuma, on the other hand, is pretty good in his normal Akuma state. And then he just gets a white palette hair swap for Shin Akuma, which sure does exist. And then we get to...
Well, that certainly is a model.
That's a fucking Lego man with an inflatable morph suit.
Ultra Instinct aside,
his initial transformation seems pretty cool, and then they have him change in one frame, which is just not cool. Then we get Oni's Island Punch, which for some reason is in first person. I honestly couldn't tell what was happening the first time, and I don't know why they did this. But the model itself is just horrible. Many of its limbs are completely squished, and it moves in ways that's so unnatural. Like when he uppercuts Khan in this scene, or when he's about to pose with a Raging Demon and his wrist is completely squished. It also fails to make Oni feel powerful because many of his attacks are just no-sold by Khan.
No sold. Get it? Because they like the souls.
And I don't know if that's supposed to be the way the animation is or if it just looks terrible, but I'm gonna guess it's the latter. Because there's no effects for a lot of his punches and during the Hadouken spam, which you can also see him clipping through his body several times. And they also decided to become a Death Battle thumbnail maker by using a Google Images Lensflare PNG. Which, why? Yeah, a lot of the effects in this fight look terrible, like this green screen smoke effect after Akuma does the Hadouken, or this green screen effect after Akuma does the Shoryuken on Khan.
You get a lot of moments of just completely stiff animation where it feels like they're barely acting. actually human. And not to mention, there's this shot where Akuma is shooting all these energy blasts down, and instead of actually making an effect of them bouncing off Shao Kahn's shield, they just flip the PNG.
Cause that's how you make them real powerful.
Let's circle back to Shin Akuma for a second. This is seen as Akuma's strongest form before Oni, and he lands 2 hits, which is immediately countered by a god-awful X-Ray. We've already seen several versions of X-Rays throughout Death Battle history, but somehow the most recent is the worst one, because, speaking of PNGs, oh boy, look what it is. Just images and renders of skulls, with no real seamless transition or anything.
And it doesn't even look like Akuma's skull.
Oh, but the real highlight is the ending where we actually get a legitimately cool and probably the best shot in the fight, with Oni landing his Raging Demon, with the Times New Roman font for the Raging Demon symbol, which, why? But then he lands it, which admittedly is pretty cool, but then Kahn catches it, and I guess because he was such jealous of Shin Akuma's swag, he decides to replicate his face, accompanied by a close-up giving us one of the most baffling shots I have ever seen in this show, which just
And
looks...
the pencil sharpener for a mouth.
Well, it was definitely the highlight of the fight. Anyways, then Shao Kahn rips off Oni's arm, which I initially thought his arm was smashed by the hammer because of that shot, but then I was later told that no, he just kind of rips it off, and I was just like, okay. Anyways, he just bumps Oni and then the hammer teleports over his head because why not? And because Kahn is just on a mission to speedrun this episode, he immediately hits Oni with the hammer, having no impact or time to let the death set in at all. Oh, and the kill is also off-screen because, yes, an MK kill off-screen is clearly the best way to do it.
And let's not forget the green screen blood. Gotta have that.
Oh, and then he also says flawless victory while he has a heavily damaged body because...
It's a reference to Shao Kahn versus M. Bison.
And yeah, that sure was a battle. But it doesn't stop there, because there's something else that I don't see addressed with this episode not many people comment on. Post-analysis. It's the weakest this season. Why? Well, for how utterly barren it is. Like, for instance, did you ever notice that there's no black boxes for the post-analysis? Yeah, they're just completely gone. And it's not like you can argue, oh, it's stopped by the logic, so it wasn't needed. Well, every other episode this season has had them, some of which have had much more bigger gaps in power and speed. The only other episodes that didn't have them was the joke episode, which, it's the joke episode, why would you even need them? And the one where they actually didn't need any black boxes. I don't want to go more in depth than that because I refuse to step into the realm of versus debating, but it does feel like the absolute bare minimum needed for the match, which is a bit disappointing to see.
Well, I personally think the lack of black boxes isn't detrimental to the post-analysis itself, as other episodes have read fine without it. I do agree, it does feel pretty weird to not have them in the episode itself, especially after seasons and seasons of just them being there. But yeah, as my co-host said, this episode has a lot of problems, and it makes me wish that this episode was handled a lot better, as someone who has been wanting this mashup since Season 2. Maybe sprites would have been better instead of 3D, because as you can clearly see here, it's not the animator's strongest points when it comes to their animation.
But, you know, with all that said, it was actually pretty accurate to the source material. It does match modern NetherRealm animations, so point for that, I suppose.
Guys, I'm more than happy to put this segment behind us, but Hyper really just said that Shao Kahn's shoes are raggedy. He's coming to kill us now, and I really hope you guys are aware of that.
What?
No.
Oh yeah!
So, little known fact, did you know that every 50 episodes, Death Battle makes an episode that people just don't like? Whenever an episode ends with the number 50, which granted has only happened twice, the community doesn't have a really high opinion of it. So, let's get over why.
It's funny how the 50 episode anniversaries are all, like, weird in their quality, and the 25 ones are the really good ones.
I don't know, man. I kind of like Mario vs. Sonic 2.
Shut the
And as for the 150th episode, it's falls into a very weird category, which, well, we were told going into it, but weren't really exactly sure what it was going to be. And it was something.
It certainly was something.
I think the first red flag that everyone noticed was the time. It's only 12 minutes long. You can't really accomplish much in an episode like that, especially if it's an anniversary one. So it's clear they're not taking the typical approach here. So what's the deal?
So the big issue with this episode ended up being its structure. Basically, the entire episode functioned as the analysis and the animation at the same time, and we just jumped back and forth.
Honestly, it would have been pretty cool to have like a special formatted DV episode for these two characters, and having a Wiz and Boomstick centered show would also be fine on its own. But when you combine the two together, you get an unfocused episode in general.
I would like to add to this. A Wiz and Boomstick centered show sounds like a fun time, but the problem is the plot that they choose is the running gag that everyone has been sick of since season 5. I'll elaborate more on that later. For now, let's just take a look at the episode itself.
For what it's worth, it doesn't start off too bad. Ringmaster calls out Boomstick that he found his dad. It's a great start. But he mistakenly assumes it to be Randy Savage, which... sure. And then Wiz just drops an analysis on Randy Savage, because he just apparently knows him on the spot. I know that they do analyses for all these other characters, but here they literally just saw the dude and just immediately know everything about him. I just find that a bit funny. And it's pretty good. I like the aesthetic of it with the style choice and how much they're hyping up Randy. And it's not that bad.
Do you think Wiz does an analysis on his date whenever he goes on Tinder?
That's a good question, but also I want to say I disagree with the style. The CRT aesthetic is really distracting, and the words, the letters, are just really unappealing in how they're sort of blurred.
Personally, I really like the aesthetic. It gave me the feel of like a sitcom.
It's an acquired taste, and the same deal for Kool-Aid Man, going over his ridiculous history of commercials, and also how he's objectively the better product, and as well as getting a cameo from Jocelyn and Dummy, even helping out with a calculation, which I found to be pretty cool. These sort of interactions with one-off Death Battle characters is really appreciated, and I kinda like that. But then it ends pretty abruptly compared to the rest of the other episodes this season. So yeah, short and sweet, I guess.
Personally, I always love when Death Battle talks about ridiculous feats, and this episode delivered plenty of them. But yeah, I will admit, the analysis was just pretty short compared to everything else in the season.
And jumping back to what Hyper said, honestly, I thought that the inclusion of the other Death Battle characters was really natural, and they fit their roles wonderfully in this. Frankly, this episode felt more like Death Battle than it did Macho Man vs. Kool-Aid Man.
Which is why it should have been its own spin-off show. Oh yeah, the fight. There's barely anything of it.
To elaborate on that, it starts pretty well. They say each other's iconic lines, use some of their wacky abilities like the lightning stick and time reversal. It's all pretty good. Randy does the giant suplex on Kool-Aid Man and it looks great. And then Wiz and Boomstick just...
They start talking again!
I mean, yeah, they are watching it, but I wish we were seeing more of it. But it's still pretty good as they make a hilarious reference to the creation of Adam. And then Kool-Aid Man creates Portal to his Kool-Aid dimension, which looks absolutely stunning, and we already knew about this ahead of time.
Yeah, the DB can really love to spoil all the cool things in this episode, like the stop motion part, and half the animation, and the only thing that we didn't get spoiled on was the result itself.
And yeah, knowing about it ahead of time doesn't change the fact that it's still cool, but it does lose a lot of surprise factor because it's less like, yo, this is so cool. It's like, oh, hey, the thing they already told us about. I guess that's kind of neat. I mean, I know some people don't mind that as much, which, like, fair, but consider the others who do at least, because, like...
The episode itself was short enough, and they spoiled almost all of it.
Exactly, and that's actually where the problem comes from. Not necessarily showing off small portion of the episode, but showing off technically a good, like half of the episode, ultimately.
The analysis themselves in the previews were basically just the entire analysis. And even the whole analysis was just shown off in the preview. And it really didn't leave much of any surprises. But then there's the ending. Kool-Aid Man slams down Macho Man, and then Macho Man responds by just drinking him, because, you know, that's the product. And it's pretty creative. And then we get a pretty good fake out, which I wasn't expecting from this episode, and Kool-Aid Man won.
This is the episode that broke everyone's streak. Isn't that weird?
It was the joke episode, and I find that very humorous. And Boomstick realizes he's the spawn of a drink, which he should be very proud of. I don't know why he's so surprised about that,
Except he's not.
which is disappointing.
Because it turns out Sarge was Boomstick's real father.
Oh boy! We already knew that!
Yeah!
With roughly 4 minutes of the episode left, you're gonna be left runner. No, you're not gonna be left runner, and you already know how this is going to end. You saw Barbara's name in the cameo, and when they teased this episode, you know full well where they're gonna go. First and foremost, we should address the elephant in the room. Deadpool's inclusion was fucking stupid, and we all know it. Okay, next biggest elephant. This episode was meant to be the finale to the arc of Boomstick's dad jokes.
Father!
But the thing is, I think they were incredibly overhated. This seems like an important thing to the character, and to just kind of nonchalantly finish it off an episode makes sense if it was resolved nicely. And it wasn't. No. Boomstick meets up with his mom, and then they do a classic rock reference to that one song called You Can't Always Get What You Want, and then they just kind of stop it. That's the end. What? I'm not really expecting anything truly emotional out of a joke episode, at least, but I do think that the plot could have been resolved way, way better. Especially for something that so many people can relate to, especially in the States. So, needless to say, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that it was handled the way it was. The fight itself is fine. The death is fine. The analysis... And Deadpool is bad, but this right here is why I ranked the episode so low. I understand that people didn't like the running gag. If they wanted to end the running gag, I would at least wish that they did it in a way that was more satisfying to watch. Other than tell us something that we already knew all the way back in season 3, and I guess they expected us to forget or something? I don't know. At the very least, this is an episode that I can tell that the team had a lot of fun with, and that's not something I'm gonna take away from them. That's why it's second to last.
And honestly, that's actually why I do at least have some appreciation for this episode. Even if it's on the bottom of my list, I do still think it was a passion project, more than anything else.
Despite this being one of the more disappointing episodes of the season, I can at least look back at it and remember stuff from it, which I can't say a lot about other episodes in other seasons.
It was a good time all around, just something that could have been a lot better, but hey, they had fun with it, so it's cool. But you know, if Macho Man was able to drink Kool-Aid Man like normal, and probably would have been fine if it wasn't an attack, does that apply to other food mascots?
What?
Hey, so, Gumball,
Hello?
do you just not have ears, or do your horns count as ears?
My horns do count as ears, actually. They have 0.5 times the hearing.
What?
What?
Boy, Ruby sure is a series that happens on Death Battle occasionally. We went from an episode that sure did show off some things about Yang, probably more than it really should have, and the next one was actually really good, no complaints there. But it also had to follow the most controversial episode in all of Death Battle, so... Yeah.
And now here we are with Blake versus Mikasa, which, to be nice, is the middle ground between the other two.
And yeah, that just leaves one more member of Team Ruby left to get in. Oh boy, I wonder when that might happen.
Never.
It won't. The analysis was actually pretty fine. It was able to go over everything you need to know about Blake, a little bit of the world building for Ruby, and a little bit of the forced drama between the finale that's seen as controversial at best. Oh, I don't like where this is going.
And then we have Mikasa's, which goes over her story and characters well. But the jokes, they kind of forgot about.
You know, frankly, I don't have much of a problem even with Mikasa's half of the analysis. Both sides did entertain me. Even, yes, that one joke. I don't really care that much about it. It existed.
But hey, if the fight was pretty exceptional with good choreography and speed, then hey, it could be pretty good.
It wasn't.
As you probably heard by now, the frame rate. It looks very distracting because of how choppy it is, especially when the character's hairs itself moves on different frames. So whenever there's a moment of good choreography, it doesn't really get a chance to shine all that much. And then whenever there isn't, we get dumb moments like this silly Mikasa run, or many of Mikasa's expressions. While there are some cool shots here and there, I can't say that they really help the animation rise above those issues.
As far as this animation goes, I actually probably have the least problem out of all of us here. Frankly, I do not mind the frame rate. The only nitpick I could make is the fact that the individual characters run on different frame rates. I care more about that than the actual choppiness of it. And secondly, the more important bit for me, the fact that Blake did not have a voice actress in this.
Out of all the characters this season, the one that they should probably have the easiest access to through Rooster Teeth they couldn't get, for reasons still unknown. Which kinda just leaves Blake in this uncharacteristic attitude where she just initiates the fight for no reason when Mikasa's just trying to warn her. And then when she sees a giant titan looming over her, she just blankly smiles in joy with a chopped off orange and just says, "Incoming," as if the titan is about to attack when it's just standing there. Probably more confused about why she just said that for no reason. And yeah, it is a bit unfortunate, though it is kind of accurate with how little Blake says in the latest volume, so points for that, I suppose.
Shout out to the leave me alone line in particular while she's coming at you with attempt to kill.
Yeah, and speaking of VAs, Mikasa does a pretty good job, for the most part.
Are those two sets of ears? She must have
Many symptoms.
Emphasis on the most part. But otherwise, she does a pretty good job, and kind of acts more of just the central focus of the fight, which I do kind of like. But then she loses at the end, and then it just sort of leaves out as like the underdog not getting the underdog win. And instead it just plays out just her being bodied through most of the fight. Unfortunate. Oh yeah, you had this at the bottom of your list, Speedy. What do you think of it?
Well, one of the reasons why I have it at the bottom of my list is because there's nothing really memorable about this episode. I mean, the episode itself is fine. I don't think any episode in the season has been bad, but it's just hasn't anything memorable in it. The analysis was fine, nothing memorable. The fight was fine, but nothing memorable. And that's pretty much the episode in entirety for me. It's just nothing memorable about it. I mean, the animation can look nice in some places. And I will admit, I am a sucker for a Ruby win every once in a while. But I can't say that that's enough for the episode to go higher on my list, personally.
That's fair all around, but I'm gonna have to disagree on the memorable part, because there is one memorable moment that sticks out to me and a lot of other people. The ending. We get the cool shot with Mikasa chopping off Blake's arm, which is a reference to Yang's arm being chopped off at the end of Volume 3.
Oh my god, that's not how aura works!
But that's not the memorable part I'm mentioning. It's when Mikasa throws the rocket spear and Blake redirects it at her and we get one of the funniest moments in the entire season, and it's not even close. And that was the fight, and yeah, a lot of things most of us didn't really seem to be fond of. But there's one thing we can all agree on. The track is really good.
I do kind of feel bad for Your Only Mate because we kind of ranked this episode pretty low. On the topic of that, do you think that cake you made was good?
Oh, definitely.
Probably.
Uh-huh.
What do you think it tasted like?
Well, there was purple flavor.
This fight wasn't totally straightforward.
Getting real fucking sick of your lies, fat man.
was totally Ray, guys, I swear. She had a chance just as much as Delsin. I'd be laughing if I wasn't so miffed when I saw the next time. Yeah, I know a matchup doesn't make an episode, but why this one? And why in this season? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Apparently this was gonna happen for years on end, which, okay, and that doesn't give much history, like, at all. It's just a match that they wanted to do for a while. That could apply to literally any season. But, whatever, sure.
This matchup really didn't need to happen this season. First of all, why in this season? A season to commemorate all the matchups that had history with Death Battle as a whole. But then you look at Korra vs. Storm, and you realize how much it sticks out like a sore thumb. You look at other matchups like Batman vs. Iron Man. Batman vs. Iron Man was a matchup they had planned for a while now, but never had the chance to do because they thought it was too one-sided, until they figured out a way to make it work. Dio vs. Alucard has lots of history, which I don't even need to go into. But Korra vs. Storm, well, Ben likes it, I guess? Yeah, that's the only history it has with the show and crew. Compared to all the other episodes in the season, it really just sticks out. Maybe if this episode happened in the next season, people would have been fine with it. Because, it's not really a legacy matchup. But the fact that this episode took priority over other requested matchups really says a lot. Doesn't really help that this episode was just a big stomp.
But hey, as long as there's some merits behind it, it could get a pass. But the connections for this are nothing. Oh, well, I guess they could both control the weather, and that's pretty much it. And no, they are not the same race, don't confuse that, and that's honestly just kind of dumb. Don't use that for connections.
Honestly, as time goes on, I don't think this matchup is as bad as everyone makes it out to be. Sure, the connections are extremely lackluster, and in terms of debate, there just isn't any. But in terms of the aesthetic and how well they fit into the Avatar universe, I do think that Storm is the best option from an animation standpoint.
But hey, this isn't about the matchup, this is about the episode. How is the actual quality of it? It just kind of exists. It didn't leave any impact. And just sort of made me feel completely emotionless like I am now, and it's just kind of there, and it's not bad or good, it just kinda happened. So the analysis is...
If I hear Queen one more time, I'm going to snap.
The analysis starts out pretty fine. They even got an extra VA to replicate the Korra intro, which doesn't show up for the rest of the analysis, but hey, it was cool that was there. And then they just casually drops Korra's best feat in the intro, which isn't okay and kinda just detracts from the rest of the analysis when they just sort of keep bumping these out. They do recover themselves back halfway through and then just provide more feats that are not even close to Korra's best when they already gave her. So a bit of a mixed bag, but it was good. Storm is just... okay, it's not longer than Korra's, but it feels longer with the amount of abilities, feats, and scaling they give her just out of the gate. They don't even try to hide that this is a stomp at all. With just constant feat after feat after feat, and it was just kind of boring to me. Yeah, they do talk about some story here and there, but I honestly just did not care. And it was so obvious that even most casuals were able to guess into how Korra could even stand a chance, which, yeah, of course she doesn't. But they were able to hide it for other matchups, so I don't know why they couldn't do it here, but I guess even they had a limit.
On that note, I do find it pretty funny that the rundown is basically feet dumps, considering how completely lowballed Storm is for the casual audience.
I actually don't think I cared too much for the analysis on Korra or Storm's side, mostly just because it didn't feel focused enough on the character. I didn't feel like it attached me to either of them. It just felt like listing factoids about each character and nothing else. A well-written analysis can actually make you understand the character. These didn't do that.
On the topic of character, many people didn't like Korra because she seemed bossy, cocky, and arrogant. But I've been told that throughout the series, she grows past that. So how is she in the animation? Bossy, cocky, and arrogant. This is a good start.
To clarify, this isn't Korra being out of character, but more or less being portrayed by her Season 1 outlook, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just an odd decision they tend to do from time to time, and I'm not really a fan of.
This won't be the last female protagonist that is solely betrayed by their personality near the beginning of the series, by the way.
No shit, stupid!
Well, for Korra, it isn't as bad as later in the series. She still has those elements within her, and throughout the fight, she is pretty represented well past that intro part. So I think Korra's end was pretty well done. Storm sure is a comic book character that I don't care about.
You see, despite what I said about Korra's character, the thing I like is that she actually has a character. Storm doesn't have that. But I can't really blame the Death Battle staff because this is just how Storm is.
And now's a good time to remind you that these are just our opinions on the characters and the episodes, not facts.
Well, maybe for you guys, but mine is factual. I have never been wrong in my entire life.
But regardless, Storm is portrayed as Storm, and for her fans, that's fine, I guess. Too bad she doesn't really do much in the animation.
Riddle me this, dear viewer. You want to make a lopsided matchup look kind of close in the animation aspect. How do you do it? You make it so that Storm only hits her 4 times. I understand the concept behind this. I believe their intention was to make it look like that Korra was carrying the fight, either her abilities and fighting prowess. But in execution, it just really makes it look like that Storm wasn't trying at all. And through her personality and how laid back she sounds, this really does not work well.
Now, for some positives about the animation. The animation itself was fair than anything. The voice actors were pretty good, especially Korra's VA. She did a pretty good job. But one of the highlights of the fight is when the fight takes place in the Fog of Lost Souls, where we see a bunch of previous Death Battle combatants, which I always thought was a nice touch.
Oh yeah, and a little interesting person that we saw there, and it was the only time I ever popped off in the animation.
Our cameo was better though.
True.
Despite me saying this episode doesn't fit this season at all, at least it seems like the team had fun with the animation overall.
Yeah, I won't deny that even if it didn't capture me personally, there's clearly a lot of effort put into it. The effects look amazing, all the hits have a lot of impact to them, it's very fluid, and there's the occasional cool looking scene with like Storm putting out the water, all the hand-drawn bits, and Korra doing a little cheeky smile.
If there's one major positive I can give to this episode, I really do appreciate how the Avatar state was handled. A stark contrast to how Aang used his in his episode, in the form that he basically did it, but Korra was able to mix and match elements on the fly to put herself in an advantage. I really did like the way it was handled, and I'm hoping that in the future, if either character get a run back, that we can see an improvement of this form.
But yeah, I wouldn't say it's bad, it just wasn't for me.
Though I'm still a bit irritated that this episode got better animation than Akuma Khan.
That's cursed.
It is what it is sometimes. Honestly, this episode is probably one of the less memorable for me of this season, but it's still probably mid,
But it is the best Avatar episode.
which is hilarious.
But you know, guys, Captain Planet vs. Korra would have made much more sense. I mean, think about it. They said they wanted to do Aang vs. Captain Planet, but they never did it. And when they first revealed Korra, it made total sense to do it. Like, just think about it. You
Speedy.
can see, like, all the elements clashing, and it would be so cool. And I would be like, oh yeah, guys, I totally called it.
Speedy.
Because that's what it is. It's
Speedy.
I called that shit from the start.
Guys, I'm scared. I hear voices. It's telling me to do stuff.
So, this matchup was kind of inevitable as soon as we got Ryuko revealed this season, and I've gotta say, not very much of a fan. You guys probably are aware of my top 10s, but I'm not gonna get into that. Point is, this matchup I think is pretty shallow as far as what it can offer, and people really overstated how much it could offer.
Well, you see, in my opinion, I think it gets a lot of undue hate. It has a good amount of merit to it, and I think it works pretty well for what it is.
Plus, it's not Ryuko versus Akane, so that's a W. Let's go!
Hot take, but this matchup just started as a joke. You can't convince me that Ryuko was unironically put up against Shadow for the connections. Because honestly, this matchup just feel like it started off as a joke, and then people started to realize, oh yeah, this matchup has actually some solid connections. And that ball just kind of went with it. Even though I think Ryuko should have been saved for a certain other anime character, but, you know, that's just me.
Honestly, I agree with Speedy. For a long time, I only ever saw this matchup's connections brought up in a sort of joking sense. People didn't really take the matchup seriously, but acknowledged its connections. And that's the boat I stayed in until present day. I still am in that boat.
Regardless of our feelings towards the matchup itself, how does the episode hold up? Well, less than 10 seconds in, and they called them both edgelords. This is red flag number 1. But don't worry, it gets better. I actually enjoy Shadow's analysis a good bit. Despite him being here twice already, this still feels like a fresh and bold take on the character that they've analyzed before. Although, when they list off the attacks where they go Chaos Rift, Chaos Blast, and the deadly Chaos Spear, what the fuck was that? That's like saying Goku could perform destructive energy waves, Kamehamehas, or the deadly Standard Ki Blast. That is legitimately the exact same. Why did they put so much emphasis on the Chaos Spear? That's a normal attack. Why? Other than that, I still like this rundown quite a bit. Even if the cutaway gag is incredibly, very much a cutaway gag.
It's a whole lot of nothing. But I'd rather take nothing than what we got for Ryuko's cutaway because...
Well, a popular theory suggests that it's all a metaphor for...
No.
I will mention that that theory probably does hold some weight as far as the subtext of the series, but it's still awkward as hell.
Especially the ad transition.
I blame Japan. When this episode came out, I had just finished Kill la Kill. And honestly, I think they did a pretty good analysis for Ryuko. And they did a pretty good job talking about Ryuko's abilities and character as a whole. Granted, the whole
metaphor for...
was a bit unsettling to say the least. But as someone who is a fan of the series, I can definitely say they didn't just half-ass it.
Although one problem I do have with Ryuko's analysis is how much it doesn't really focus on Senketsu himself when he's like an essential part of Ryuko and how much they bounce off each other. So it just seems a little strange that he didn't get much focus in there. And frankly, with most of the world of Kill la Kill itself, it just didn't talk about it much, just Ryuko's power set, and that's it.
Now, to be fair, most of Ryuko's power set is about Senketsu. And Senketsu does get a lot of screen time in the battle itself, so I could forgive it for that.
And on the note of the battle, this animation was overall pretty good. I do think there were some wonky facial animations for Ryuko. That's my main complaint that I can mention.
I agree with that as well, but most of the rigging for the movement and the actual pace of the action is incredible.
I personally really enjoyed the way Shadow was done in the animation aspect. His speed feels real fluid and smooth, which really helps when it feels like he has control of the battle. Especially attacks like the homing attack or spin dash look really nice in this fight, and the sword fight that they do later on is freaking god tier. Of course, I would be an idiot if I were to not mention the climax, where Super Shadow and Golden Girl Ryuko clash up in space, where the deadly Chaos Spear makes its grand entrance and does absolutely fucking nothing. The animation itself is amazing. There are other problems, though.
Yeah, about those issues. Ryuko feels like her episode 1 self, meaning that her banter with Senketsu is just her yelling at him for the entire fight, which might seem really out of character for people, and I totally understand that, as it is a weird choice from the animation perspective. And frankly, I can't disagree, honestly.
And yeah, that makes our second female character who was represented by their early series characterization.
It still ain't the last.
And also Shadow's new voice. While he isn't Taka, I mean, he gets the job done, which isn't really a problem necessarily for me. But I still miss my boy Takahata 101, man.
What's your problem? Shut up!
Ryuko's VA also does a pretty good job. Aside from a few off deliveries, most of it's pretty good. Senketsu's literally just sounds like Senketsu. Huh. Going back to the climax, Ryuko says the line is a callback to the previous Shadow episodes, which was needed, although she says it alongside a swear, which is a bit jarring, but I really don't care. That climax is amazing with the giant scissor blades eclipsing the planet, crushing Shadow, and then Shadow finally countered the Sayonara. Way to go, guy. And leads to, in my opinion, a pretty good death.
Most of the time, the tracks are really good, and this season was no exception. And while Chaos Unraveled is still a good song to listen to, it doesn't represent Shadow Ryoko that well at all. Instead, focusing rather on the lyrics itself rather than the instruments that it provides. It doesn't fit the tone of Sonic or Kill la Kill at all. And while this song certainly has its fans, this is really just a letdown for me.
This was actually a track where everyone had high expectations just because of the source material.
Well, you see, y'all are just mean, and I think it's pretty good, but definitely not one of the best.
Oh, I certainly liked the song, don't get me wrong.
I thought it was fine.
Overall, while this episode does have its flaws, Lord knows there are flaws in here. People, myself included, really do like this one. Definitely a solid follow-up to the first episode of the season.
It was certainly better than either of Shadow's previous episodes, and if it's the last Shadow episode, I'll be disappointed, but it won't have been bad.
Mewtwo vs. Shadow was a 10 out of 10.
Okay, kill the hat. This is where I watched Batman die for the third time, Cat.
Should have been fourth.
Man, it's pretty funny they brought back the same character they've reused 3 times already for the 4th time. And now they've opened up that possibility. Again. But yeah, here's Batman for the 4th time. And, okay, let me get this out of the way. Batman is my favorite character that Death Battle has used, and it's interesting to see him appear yet again when they've exhausted pretty much everything they've had with him in his previous 3 episodes. But I wasn't going to count this one out because, okay, well, initially when they just left us the reveal with Batman for a 4th time, oh, hey, look, with a new suit, people were naturally really sick of it. Because who would want to see Batman again do the same thing for a 4th time with nothing new or different? And yeah, I won't deny I was part of that crowd as well.
Lucky for us, Batman wasn't going to be doing the same exact thing for the 4th time. But whether that's for better or worse, I really can't tell.
It's basically Batman and Iron Man with all of their suits. No restrictions there. They could just go ham with all their suits, and I'm gonna really like that. I think it's a pretty great idea in a vacuum outside the context of DB. Within the context, yeah, it is a bit tiresome to see Bats for a 4th time again, but hey, it is in a different outlook of Batman, which I was hoping to see because, well, I mean, outside of the first one, I'm not really that fond of his other episodes. So hey, we can see if this one tried anything different. And Tony, well, I mean, I really don't think he should have come back because he had one of the best moments in all of Death Battle history. But hey, he could still do different stuff, so why not? And yeah, I was pretty hyped for it. I was running around with the possibilities of like all these different types of suits and things they could counter each other with throughout the battle and as it progressed. And to see one of my favorite characters be represented in a new Bond light. And I was like, okay, I'm down for this. Let's see what they do with this.
Unfortunately, though, the way that this episode had to be structured for animation purposes, they don't exactly have the budget for all of those ideas. And you could definitely see that Batman kinda got shafted on that end.
Batman's rundown immediately starts with a no-scope joke in 2021. Great. And while I do understand that there is some new stuff that they delve into, which I do appreciate, this is just Batman again. It gets real annoying when they bring up all this stuff about base Batman when we know for a fact base Batman will do jack shit here. It kind of felt like they were trying to glorify a part of Batman we weren't going to see, so what's the point? And when we do finally get to the other suits, it's actually pretty cool. They go into detail about the final Bat suit and just how powerful it is, and for the most part, I enjoy Batman's rundown up to this point. but the beginning is such a slog to get through with so little jokes that stand out that I really just don't care. Tony's rundown, on the other hand, is a breath of fresh air, since he's only been used once by this point, and he's gotten a whole bunch of new shit since then. Thanks to the MCU, we now have new references and jokes that we could pull from to give us a new Iron Man than the one that we knew from Season 2. The new suits they go into detail on are really interesting, especially the Sword Art Online one. I've never heard of that one, and to realize just how batshit insane, no pun intended, it was really started to make me doubt who I was rooting for here, because like a good chunk of the Versus community, I was betting on Batman to take the win. They wouldn't really bring it back just to kill him again, would they? Yes, they did, but we're getting there. Overall, Batman's analysis is really boring up until near the end, while Tony's analysis was really engaging.
I mean, personally, I think it's the other way around. While I do enjoy both pretty well, I really was fond of Bats, but that's probably just because of personal attachment, but I won't judge for that.
Honestly, out of any matchup this season, this one was probably the most hotly debated. People don't consider it the closest nowadays, but I still don't think any other matchup even came close to how much back and forth this one had.
Wait a second, the most debatable matchup of the season? I'm pretty sure that was Korra vs. Storm.
With that out of the way, let's get into the animation itself.
The animation opens up with Batman listening to K-pop again, because he hasn't learned his lesson last time.
I guess this is just a running character trait they're going with for Batman, which I guess I don't mind.
Kyle is also a weeb, so I guess it's just a running theme in DC characters.
They're envious of the better media. After his new dad Piccolo from DBX broke, Tony decides to go bug Bruce again, this time about the watchtower that he has online.
Here we get another sprite fight, and Batman almost immediately goes into the Hellbat, and you know, Tony spooked him enough that he figured it would be a great idea to just play baseball with the watchtower instead of protecting it, because, sure.
Yeah, it looks cool, but also it makes no sense. It completely breaks immersion, which I'm not a fan of.
Which is made all the more useless after it's revealed that Tony was just the robotic replica, or a Tony bot, you knuckle-dragging buffoon.
But hey, at least we got the exchange everyone was hoping for.
And it feels forced.
What did you expect? I am Batman. And I
Took 40 cakes.
My co-host's wrong opinions aside, we now get to my favorite part of the fight, all the Iron Man suits versus the Hellbat. The Hellbat threw up some weird bat part or something at the Iron Man suits, and it's just hell from there. You fucking get to see explosions, death all over the place, suits getting torn apart. Man, this is so awesome. And then we get to see the Godbuster suit and the Hellbat clash together in one cool-ass DBC beam struggle. Tony gets knocked out of the suit, Batman looming over him. Luckily, Tony has one trick up his sleeve. The Soul's Hammer. But it turns out that wasn't even enough to kill the Batman. He gets ready to beat Tony's ass, worse than Hank Pym's wife. But luckily, Tony has another trick up his sleeve. The nanomachine, son. Tony then says self-destruct mode, activate, and then the suit explodes.
Batman is gone, and in his place, Skeletor.
Tony becomes so shocked about this fact that he goes back to his old drinking habits.
That definitely is not how it went down, but I'm not gonna argue with you.
And yeah, as Speedy said, there are a lot of good things with it, and in terms of animation, it just looks great. There are no flaws with the animation itself.
And just to address it, the voice actors for this were top-notch in my opinion.
Johnny does a really good job knocking it out of the park. While they didn't get Tony's previous voice actor, the new guy still does a pretty good job overall.
But there's just some major factors that keeps this down for me, and it generally comes down to the odd pacing and progression of the battle, and Batman's portrayal. As soon as he enters the Hellbat, he just fights like some generic herald, like every other Marvel vs. DC episode. This isn't Batman to me. This is just some boring random herald that doesn't act smart or employ any sort of strategies like the Batman I know and the Batman that was established in the analysis itself. All he does is just brute force his way through every single situation, and while it certainly looks incredible, it doesn't really portray him as smart, and it's not really all that interesting, at least in my opinion. Worst case offender is the ending where Tony tricks him with the drone that he set up on his body back on the watchtower, and throughout the entire fight he never noticed it on him. And like, having a character as
prepared and as smart thinking as Batman be foiled by a hack just feels wrong on so many levels to me. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, I'm not going to judge, but in terms of just a character portrayal, it doesn't feel right.
Maybe a moment like that wouldn't feel so jarring if Batman tried to replicate a hack in turn. At the very least, tried to consider the idea of a hack to Tony, since these are both mastermind characters here. But Batman never really gets to show that intellect except for the very beginning where he places the Batarang by the Watchtower control panel, which, again, is a pretty fucking dumb move when you're trying to protect the Watchtower.
If you think about it, if they had handled it in a similar way to Blake versus Mikasa of all things, they could have had Batman feel smarter by thinking up a plan even if he didn't get to perform said plan.
Granted, while most of the issues Hyper addressed were valid, I think you also have to look at it at a different perspective. Batman is using the Hellbat suit, a suit that generally focuses on brawl over brains. And while it is kind of jarring to see Batman act more like a brute, remember, he knows the suit will kill him, so it's best that he kills Tony as fast as possible. It made sense that he didn't think of a strategic plan right away.
Fair, I suppose. But that leads into another issue I have. Why was Batman just stuck with the Hellbat in the animation? Tony gets a fair amount of stuff with the Godbuster, all the other armors helping him out during the rushdown on the Hellbat, and the digital armor, and some tech as well, like the Nano Forge and Soul's Hammer. Tony had a lot of stuff here. But Batman just gets the Hellbat, and that's it.
And some Batarangs.
And yes, I am fully aware the team said
And a grappling hook!
That the team said they were very limited on sprite resources for Batman. Which, fair. But there's two things about that. One, why was this advertised as if both were going to get everything? Because if they can't afford this to be more than just some basic boring Herald fight, then don't advertise it like that. And heck, even if I managed to dodge the hype for it during the waiting period, the analysis sets it up as if both are going to get a ton of their suits during the animation and keep switching them out frequently throughout the battle. Now I don't expect a whole lot, like just a good, decent amount on both sides to make it seem fairly even. And it isn't an unrealistic expectation I had going in the episode when I was disappointed to learn that one of the combatants only got one suit and no other suits or gadgets on their end, while the other guy had a few other suits and gadgets on their end. Great. Perfectly balanced. Or well, actually not really, because the pacing of the progression in the battle is kind of messy in my opinion. Because throughout most of the fight, Tony kinda gets manhandled once Batman enters the Hellbat, destroying his basic armor almost immediately, one-shotting all of his protocol droids, and two-shotting the armor they said that he was on par with in the analysis, but then have the Hellbat be taken out in one shot by a sun-powered laser. Yeah, the pacing of this feels incredibly rushed. Oh yeah, and if you have been keeping count, once Batman enters the Hellbat, he only gets hit twice throughout the entire animation. I don't want to make it seem as though I hate the episode. I don't. I think it's perfectly fine, but it's one of the most disappointing episodes to me. It could have been so much more. If you got more out of this episode than I did, that's perfectly fine. I'm happy you can enjoy it more than I can. But, well, it is the best episode featuring Batman, but it doesn't feel like the definitive Batman episode I was looking forward to.
Now, granted, maybe the reason why Batman was stuck in one suit was because it's hard to convey that as the same as Tony switching suits, without having the pace of the fight slow down, by having Batman just run into another suit over and over again, which would, like I said earlier, slow down the pacing by a lot. The Hellbat soloing almost everything Tony throws at it could be just to emphasize how much the Hellbat itself dwarfs almost everything Tony has when it comes to his standard suits. And even the Godbuster itself is definitely an even match for it, though it would make sense that Tony himself would have to resort into hacking and just ignoring that stat advantage. So it would boil down to Tony trying to ignore the stat advantage and try to hack it, something that Batman doesn't really have a defense against. Now, that's all I can defend about the episode itself. But like Hyper said, what's the point of using Batman with old suits if you're not going to take advantage of it? At that point, it just comes out as a kind of a disappointing result and just overall a letdown. But that track was fucking banger though! Oh.
Suit yourself is a mixed bag for me. On one hand, it definitely grew on me over time, and I really do appreciate the classic rock. It's definitely my favorite genre of music, and to see it replicated really does make me happy. On the other hand, This is really just more of an Iron Man track with Batman reference, other than a track for Batman versus Iron Man. Which doesn't help because Batman absolutely loathes classic rock, so it just really feels like it favors Tony even more. Overall, Batman versus Iron Man is an episode that has us divided, but not as divided as the next century.
And yeah, this kind of was a neat send-off for Batman, his 4th run. He might have lost, but it still was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure Batman will appear in Death Battle again at some point, because he's Batman.
Damn it.
I just realized something. Isn't it a bit weird that this episode is ranked higher than Batman vs. Iron Man?
Ha 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 ha. I'm gonna look like a massive hypocrite.
So surprisingly, this matchup, this episode, ended up being the most divisive on this entire list among us.
Red's right on the money with this one. We're split completely down the middle. You got 2 of us here that think the episode is underappreciated and, dare I say, overhated. And then you have the people who are right.
And actually, that sentiment is shared by the general audience too, I would say.
And it's really interesting to see because it's either people really love it and see it as one of the highlights of the season, or just another boring Marvel vs. DC match in the middle of the season.
Hello!
Yeah. Regardless if you love or hate the episode itself, most of us were definitely a bit disappointed that Lex vs. Doom was the option they went with.
You literally just said, like...
While I was impressed with the quality of the episode, I won't deny that the matchup sucks. Yeah, in a season full of Anniversary, this feels like such a filler throwaway idea that not many people will remember. But it managed to grab its own audience. So let's find out as to why.
The analysis for this episode with a matchup that no one was looking forward to was actually pretty good, except they made a Trump joke in 2021, but let's focus on the positives, shall we? As per usual these days for comic matchups, the analysis is incredibly well animated, especially on Lex's end, although it can be a bit annoying with the sound effects that they throw in there. I like taking a look at the gadgets that they go over and talk about how much of an asshole Lex is, and how overconfident Dr. Doom is, and how he will toot his horn however he pleases. These rundowns actually get me invested into the characters and what they have to offer in a versus setting, which does not hold up into the fight.
Like Gumbo was touching on earlier, this episode has probably the best editing in the season, in my opinion, of course. This was definitely the start of comic book panels coming to life. Like the part where they talk about Doom overthrowing the Baron of Latveria. You get a point of view shot of everything going on from the Baron's perspective, which I always thought was a neat touch. Or like when they talk about Doom putting on his mask and you can hear screams of agony and burning sounds in the background. It's neat touches like that that just makes the episode a whole lot better.
Honestly, in modern Death Battle, them animating the comic panels almost feels more alive than them using normal clips at this point. There's so much more effort put into making the comic panels look animated.
Yeah, the analysis for this is pretty solid, and how well they parallel both Lex and Doom. Like Lex's hatred for Superman and following his ideals of overcoming superpowered foes that stand in his way, while Doom is a selfish conqueror who hates Reed Richards and standing in this weight of world domination through his power. It's a great parallel that makes it stand out from their previous entries and gives it its own unique identity, and I really do appreciate that touch.
The fight has begun, and what you're going to notice right out the gate is how well the 3D environments blend into the sprite fights these days, especially in this season.
Johnny is back as Lex, and this time he gives a more cocky and overconfident version of Lex, rather than the slimy and sinister version he did all the way back in Season 2. And this time around, Doom actually has a voice actor, Stephen Kelly. He does a pretty good job as Doom, but I was expecting a more deeper and more menacing Doom like in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He still does his job alright enough.
And as for the animation, for what it's worth, in my opinion, I think it's pretty well made. It's very fluid, there's little moments of jank, and they use a good amount of their tools and weaponry in creative ways. And heck, it even reflects their conclusion pretty well, with Lex's physical abilities overwhelming Doom every time he gets more physical, and Doom always getting the advantage whenever he uses his abilities, such as Time Shift Bomb, the Molecular Expander, and the giant magic Master Hand looking thing. Oh, and I guess, well, technically he does get the physical advantage once with the foot dive, but it's the foot dive, you kind of have to. Even then, Lex does solidly counter him after that, so it still somewhat reflects their conclusion pretty well. And I really do like that touch, and it kind of makes for a very fun dynamic.
I actually don't think that's true. The first physical duel actually ends with Doom winning, and frankly, most of the actual fight is banter between the two, if anything. Which isn't bad, I guess. It's just not that exciting. I don't think there was a lot of thought put into what counters what. It might have coincidentally matched up more often than not, but Doom did win 2 of their physical interactions, technically.
On the topic of them showing off everything they have, that's just flat out wrong now, I just realized. Sure, they showed off a lot of tech, and I really do like the way some of it is employed, but they also put a lot of emphasis on how much of a magical character Dr. Doom is, saying that he could be compared to Sorcerer Supreme. So what magic does he do in this fight? Probably 2 energy blasts, he grabs with a magic hand, swaps bodies. That's it. And while I do agree that they were able to squeeze in a lot of the arsenal for the both of them, that's actually probably one of my biggest complaints. So much of it feels forced in, and it doesn't really flow into the battle all that well. The rocks just kind of trapping Lex in his suit just makes him look pathetic. And the time reversal bomb, ironically, just wastes a whole bunch of time in the animation, when it's very clear that if Doom could just pull his hand out, he could just kind of escape that interdimensional thing just fine. So much of the stuff is used here, and it doesn't really make much sense to me. Why summon the suit again if he's only going to fire 2 blasts and then it just breaks again? Why have the gunfight to begin with when they're both bots? That wouldn't really matter much. So much of the arsenal is there just for the sake of being there, and it just really doesn't work for me. And add to it, the already pretty bad pacing is ruined even more by the banter, as Red mentioned. I want to see these guys have a fight, not have a debate on Reddit.
In my humble opinion, the banter is the best part. This probably has the best characterization of any fight in this season. Don't at me on that, by the way. The fact that these are 2 overconfident villains that has the ego of your average versus debater is just phenomenal, and they captured it really well in the fight. The voice actors just nail out of the park. And as for the equipment and arsenal they use, I don't really see how that's an issue, in my opinion. Personally, I can kind of see why it's a bit trivial and just them throwing shit at the wall, but at the same time, it just shows off their arsenal. These are the mad scientist type of characters, and it makes sense that they would show off their gadgets to each other, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense in every situation.
Speaking of not making sense, let's take a look at Lex's suit here. Why is this an Iron Man repellent?
There is actually an existing sprite, also from Mugen, that just looks more like the warsuit, matches the color scheme of the rest of the fight much better, so it's bizarre that they went with this.
I mean, yeah, the bottle is a bit weird, but it didn't bother me that much personally. And I think it works fine enough in the animation alongside Doom Sprite, which naturally looks good because MVC2 sprites are base. And Speedy said earlier, them having just banter with each other works pretty well. They're villains. They of course are going to speak a lot. And I've seen people's issues with them talking a lot, and I don't really think it's that bad. I mean, that's just what they do. They're hawking it up, being bad guys, showing off their tech. And I find that fun. It's them being the characters.
Credit where it's due, though. I do like the finale where they swap bodies and Lex just kind of gets cut into many pieces. But I'm going to say right now, that's not for the reason it should. In terms of ironic value, the climax to this fight is the funniest thing I have witnessed in a long time in that battle, and I really do see why people unironically enjoy it. But that nose scream is just so much meme potential, and I can't let it go to waste.
And like Gumbo said, the climax is the highlight for most people anyways. Lex counters Doom with his own quote of becoming the Superman he always wanted to be, making a reference to Man of Steel. And finally, when Lex is about to unmask him,
"Why don't you take off that mask, Tin Man? Show the world how fake your speedruns truly are."
That's what the point.
Doom finally decides to get serious because he doesn't want his reputation to be ruined and swaps bodies with Lex. Lex makes a funny quote and then Doom impales Lex onto the LexCorp, which is a cool reference to the comic panel of him being stabbed on the building, and then slices him up completely and then says his awesome line in the comics about how this power reminds him of a god and that it is beneath him, and also to protect his identity.
We're getting a bit disjointed here, but I will mention the most jank part about the fight for me is the puppet sprites of Lex outside of the war suit. Not that they're awful, I like the actual artistry of the sprites, but their motions are a little bit iffy for me.
It didn't bother me that much personally, but I still think it looked good, especially during the climax. Though I do agree with Gumball that the memes are the best part of the episode.
Oh, a visitor.
It's a beautiful day outside.
Initially, I didn't care for the track, Apex of Doom at all. It sounded a bit generic for my taste, and quite honestly, even today, it hurts my ears a little. My poor Gumball Viking horn ears. But honestly, I'm really starting to dig it as of late. Especially the main melody part where it gets all heavy. Dare I say it could be a hidden gem in the Death Battle soundtrack. That being said, it still makes my ears go hurdy, so 0 out of 10.
But yeah, Apex of Doom is a good track. Like Gumball said, I was initially not digging it at first, but eventually it grew on me. And honestly, I think that's the best way to describe this episode. A hidden gem in the Death Battle community.
What's your definition of gem?
You know, I got inspired by that conclusion of Lex vs. Doom, so I actually wanted to try this new ability I just learned. Oh my god. I'm a Gumball. Where are my arms? Where's my mouth? I don't have any legs! Oh my god. Oh my god. This is a bad idea. I'm a Gumball!
I thought you were a tomato. Isn't that what the joke was for years and years and years? Look into this medallion. You've wrought this, and now I'm going to unleash its full power. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that power, but I'm sure I'm going to do something. You know what? I don't want Europe to exist anymore.
Oh, fuck that!
God damn it. Hyper. We're in the middle of a recording session. Are you playing Deltarune? Into the volcano! Michael, what the fuck? You know what, Mr. Number 14? You could start us off here, Mr. High and Mighty. I don't think it's very good. You got some explaining to do, you understand that?
So, this matchup, a lot of people were caught off guard by it getting revealed when it did. Not that people didn't expect it to happen, but when it did get announced, I know a lot of people were pretty hyped for it.
Because, like, yeah, this is a pretty popular match, but no one really expected it for the season of anniversary, but it happened, and here they are. The King of the Iron Fist, Heihachi, and Geese! I really don't know the character, I just know him from memes, but he just seems really fun.
Hyper, that sounds pretty predictable. Heihachi's rundown is pretty run-of-the-mill, but honestly pretty interesting. Aside from the Elon Musk joke, I really did enjoy Heihachi's backstory and all the jokes relating to the family bond that the Mishimas share. It was just kind of a solid time. And then Geese's rundown is actually really fun, because it's Geese Howard, and if you don't think Geese Howard is fun, I'm going to throw you off the volcano like I did to Hyper.
Yeah, what?
The fight opens up, and Remaster is there, and I can already tell that half of the people watching this video are ready to click off because of Marshall, but hey, hold on, that's not really fair.
Ringmaster announces they're both gonna fight each other to the death over their corporations because of course they would. And we get introduced to the VAs, which is a real highlight of the episode. They got a Japanese VA for Heihachi. While it doesn't sound exactly like him, the fact that they got someone to do a Japanese voice for him, he just sounds like he's just having a fun time throughout the whole thing.
Dragon Sword vs. Mechagodzilla did it first!
And then we get to Geese, who's completely voiced in English, which is perfect for the character. And a good tribute to Geese, who is always voiced in English in his home series. And Okay, yeah, it is a bit hard to tell what he's saying sometimes on a first viewing, but you can get used to it soon enough after a few rewatches, and it sounds great, making the interactions between these two just priceless.
Fun fact, Geese actually knows how to speak English properly. He just chooses not to.
The fight itself is set up like a normal fighting tournament, basically. Whoever wins gets the other's fortune, and that's a pretty good, nice setup. I like that. Now, there are combos and blows everywhere here. Even the Street Fighter reference, which is kind of weird considering they're both from franchises that aren't Street Fighter, but whatever. Overall, the fight is just solidly good. Despite only taking place in one location, it still feels different and unique at the same time. It knows that it's a simple matchup, and it works with it. Both of them get to show off their signature attacks, and the blows are just magnificently animated.
On the topic of animation, everything is just so fluid and lively. Even shots that look kind of weird, like Heihachi lifting the rock, don't bother me much because it just looks fun. This episode's fun. I genuinely have a hard time finding much to complain about in this. While nothing really blows me away, it's just solid. As BD said, the combos flow into each other seamlessly. The banter is really fun. It's also fluid and smooth, especially the money shot of the camera panning around the volcano as the two just throw out fists until they got nothing left in them, which is just incredibly in character for them.
If I had to nitpick about something, I will admit some of the hand-drawn faces seems a bit awkward, especially the one at the end with Geese burning. But overall, yeah, I don't have much to complain about it.
And it's a simple match at heart. It's a short and sweet fight, and it basically does everything with what it's given, and the climax is amazing. Heihachi throws Geese off the volcano, which was necessary, but Geese tries to bring Heihachi back down to earth for one final strike, and says one big mouthful of English that a lot of people probably didn't understand at that point, but I love this smug grinning madman to not be bothered by that, as he gives in one final strike. But Heihachi quickly turns that around, and it turns him into Sans Undertale, which is a surprising theme in this season, and I don't know why. And Heihachi punches the audience.
Now for the track itself, it does what you probably expect. It has themes from both of the franchises sprinkled in there, and it's just an overall fun time, like the episode itself.
It has Tekken Heat Haze in it. Yes.
Heat Haze Shadow, actually.
So that's it, right? Everyone seems to enjoy the episode a good bit. Everyone thinks it's like an 8 out of 10, really enjoyable. But one of us decided that we can't have nice things.
Now let's hear the guy out. Come on.
Frankly, just most of this episode was really boring to me, and even the fight, I agree that it was smooth and well animated. I liked the sprite work on them, but it was kind of slow for the majority of it. It did not feel fast-paced at all, which I know that's kind of Tekken's style, but it doesn't change the fact that it felt just sluggish at times. And the analyses did not grab my attention. It didn't get me interested in either of the characters beyond what I already felt about them. I have known Heihachi for a long time, and I know of Geese's memes, and after coming out of the episode, I do not feel any differently about either of them. The analyses just kind of felt like stating facts, if anything.
On the topic of stating facts, here's mine. I'm 100 kilometers away from your location, and I'm rapidly approaching.
But regardless, most of us here were able to enjoy it. It still got a decently high spot in the ranking, and even though it was one spot and 1 point away from it being robbed of its potential place, but regardless, it was still a pretty good time for most of us.
Over time, I think Heihachi vs. Geese is going to be one of those underrated gems throughout the series that everyone always takes for granted. Much like Ken vs. Terry, Black Widow vs. Widowmaker, and to an extent, Shredder vs. Silver Samurai. And above all else, I'm just glad that we were able to look at Geese Howard as a character and not as a meme.
Wait, guys, something's happening.
The volcano, I think it's about to erupt. Oh my god, everyone get down!
It's time.
Oh shit! Gooses!
Hey guys, you remember that one episode?
Yeah?
The one that we requested for almost 5 years?
Yeah.
The one that finally happened and me and Red cameoed in it?
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah.
Wait, what the fuck?
Words cannot describe the level of dopamine that flowed through my veins when I saw Steven fucked boy in the Next Time trailer.
I don't know, I was just like, oh yeah, Steven's gonna happen next season. I don't think I was that hyped for it.
To say that we have a history of this matchup, for the most part, is an understatement and a half. So, as a result, we may or may not have overset our expectations.
I would disagree in the fact that my expectations were probably met, but at the same time, I have been pushing for this matchup for a long time.
Well, I disagree with your disagreement.
This has cartoon characters. That's all I ever wanted.
What are you talking about, Hyper? That was the main reason why I even had it so high. Because I love cartoon matchups.
Funny enough, despite all of our history with the matchup, the main reason it got so high on this list is because of how high Speedy put it, which is really funny to me.
Yeah, the people who cameoed in it didn't rank it as high as much as Speedy. Yes, I said all the people who cameoed into it. I'm still in denial. I'm in it. Look, there I am. The stars, they still somewhat look like Friska's eyes in their sprite. Shut up.
Even as early as the rundowns, you're going to notice the main issue I have with this episode right out the gate.
Literally the first thing you get, right out the gate, calculations. Before Steven even properly gets talked about, you get a calculation for how strong Rose Quartz was.
I'm so glad she's the character going into the death battle. Aside from that, Steven's rundown is actually pretty fun. It feels unreal to see him talk about this series. Even half a year later on retrospectives, this rundown still gives me a bit of a nostalgic chill, if you will.
And I agree with that. It really does fill me with a sense of joy to hear them talk about a show that I watched when I was younger back then. It's a cool feeling to have when watching DB that I experience kind of rarely nowadays.
Meanwhile, Star's rundown is really surreal for the exact opposite reasons.
As far as Star's rundown goes, it feels like it kind of flanderized a lot of her character, and it really played into that whole joke that you got from the end of Star, spoiler alert if for some reason you care, that she basically just genocided every magical being in existence. That was the main thing that Star's rundown really hammered in, especially with the end clip for her analysis. Even though there was a lot of other layers to said character. They did touch on the whole Monsters and Mewman dispute, but it just felt like it was a side note.
Yes, I did get a really odd feeling with Stars, especially from that end clip, and just generally her whole thing felt a bit weirdly paced, while Steven's, aside from that big calculation at the start, generally flowed much better and was paced much more properly. But Stars just kind of fell back and forth at random intervals in her show's time period, and it just flow right. Also, that cutaway is cringe.
It's obviously a stand-in for...
This fight opens up on an Overwatch map. Yikes. So there they are. Star and Steven are building their castle, and Steven is leading his own children. Great start. From there, Star's castle doesn't want to work because I guess it's disabled. So instead she tries to turn it into a giant tower, which collapses on Steven and gives him flashbacks of another sand tower that collapsed on him, which would be the first of many PTSD attacks he would suffer throughout this exchange. Steven decides to pick up Star, moves her a few inches with his closed hands while he's holding her, and from here, this is where the main problem of the animation lies, or the episode in general. At first I thought it was Star being completely out of character. Then I thought it was Star just being her Season 1 self, which to an extent is true. But the fact of the matter is, it's more so that Star is characterized accurately in the worst way possible.
Star acts completely insane this entire fight. She instigates the fight for no reason, which, sure, fine, whatever. But then she gets super aggressive when Steven is just trying to defend himself. Huh? And then when Steven attacks her for the first time after she spent the whole fight hunting him down, she goes, "That was rude." Why? And then once Steven loses his cool and then finally gets serious, she goes, "Oh, that's neat." Huh? What? I just get this underlying impression that everything on Star's end feels off. Like it isn't inaccurate, like it happened in the show, but it's all the weakest elements. I don't want to see that focused on for Star. And they never do that for any other character in the show, so I don't see why Star should have been any different.
The way she's portrayed almost makes her sound like a psychopath.
which only adds to it thanks to the ending after she literally wipes out all of her magic monsters, the watermelons and rabbits, which she really didn't need to, and then she says, "I won!" with a completely evilish looking grin over the corpses of everybody who she brutally murdered. That is not okay.
And I don't know why this was added in a battle between two cartoon characters and making out one of them to be a completely genocidal maniac.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. That was the best part of the episode, if you ask me. Star just fucking murdering everyone? That shit's hilarious, if you ask me.
Let me set the stage for you. I'm at a friend's house. I'm ready to play Smash Bros with them. Everything's hunky-dory. And then I get mountains of pains because in the first members preview, people saw something that made their jaw drop. And I was shown exactly what it was. And let me tell you, I've never felt more happy to be a Death Battle fan than in this very moment.
Thank you, Origin.
I would like to thank the Death Battle staff in the middle of the video, which I know kind of disrupts the pacing, but something as simple as a cameo made my week, probably my entire month.
It was mostly Origin, but yeah, the whole staff is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm there too with all the stars and stuff, and it's like a sprite and...
Hyper, we'll get our chance someday.
Shut up, let me believe.
And you know what? There's a lot more good stuff to say about this episode. The puppet rigging is probably one of the best of the season, which is a massive improvement over the last cartoon episode we got last season, that being Danny versus Jake, which was not as bad as everyone makes it out to be, and I'm already getting off topic. I really like the setting for this one. I can only really picture a Steven Universe Death Battle taking place on the beach, and the way that they were able to get Star there without it feeling forced just really adds to it.
And also, there's just a lot of general charm in the episode, with Steven coming off as very passive and defensive, and Star, while it is a bit uncharacteristic at times, comes off more joyful and playful. And it's a dynamic that works really well, and it just creates this very fun vibe throughout the entire fight.
My favorite moment of character is when Steven gets up and see the other watermelon Stevens coming out of the ground. Just that little moment to reassure them that they're going to be okay just really cements how well characterized he is in this episode, and I really do appreciate that.
And by the way, I will mention, even throughout the entire series, Star usually has that aggressive nature to her. She is oftentimes an instigator in these sorts of things, so that part works well regardless. And as well as the fight dynamic working well, both the voice actors did a pretty good job in my opinion too.
Steven especially. All of Caden's deliveries just really felt spot on. And of course I can't really forget the leave me alone bit. That really is the best part of the fight in terms of voice delivery. Star's voice actress is pretty good, but it's just not Caden's Steven, if that makes sense.
But neither come close to the actual star of the episode.
Now, Stars of the Universe is the first real bop of the season, because this track is just jamming, and the beginning part is probably one of the best things that Death Battle has ever done for a musical track. The track itself really captures the fun and loving tone of both series really well. Now, granted, as someone who hasn't seen much of Star, in fact I've only seen the pilot episode, and I've seen almost all of Steven, I might not be as passionate about Star's portrayal than some other people are. But Star honestly gives me the face of someone who just would murder you in your sleep. I mean, look at her eyes and her butterfly form. Ugh. But nah, for real, as much as I love the Star's portrayal of this episode, I won't deny that I can definitely see why people have a problem with it. But I think it's kind of funny that they went with the whole killer vibe with her. Despite Star being a freaking psychopath, it has actually got me interested in watching the show. So, I'll maybe do that.
You know the most incredible thing about this episode? I predate Cole vs. Alex in Death Battle timelines.
I told you I was coming for your ass, bitch! You thought you were safe calling me the Z-word on Discord?
Oh, great.
So, So, this episode is actually a remake of Link vs. Cloud from all the way back in Season 1. And I definitely can say it got an upgrade. It is also cool how this was the first Blender animation, as far as I am aware, in the entire series history.
Well, I have to disagree there. The original Link vs. Cloud gave us the best faceplant in YouTube's history.
But don't you see, Gumball, they recreated it fivefold.
True. Alright, I may have not given this episode enough credit. Let's take a look. The analysis for this one is weird. Not Goku Black or Steven Weird, just weird. Links I can understand since there's multiple timelines and they really need to go through all the weapons because my god there's a lot of weapons and literally no personality to go through, so it's kind of hard to structure his normally. What's Cloud's excuse?
Cloud's is a bit weirdly paced. It's not like Cloud doesn't have a personality, because with the limited knowledge of FF7 that I do know of, he does have a story, an arc that he goes through, and it's just kind of bounces back and forth between abilities, calcs, numbers, and story, all without any sort of flow or natural progression to it, and it's just weird. Like, they make a big deal about, oh, he scales to this guy who did this big thing, but actually, no, he doesn't. But wait, he actually does, so never mind, that was just a big waste of time. Like, I don't get why they did that, or why that was done.
If you want my take on it, it was probably done specifically so that the two analyses would feel balanced with each other, rather than Cloud's being so much different than Link's.
I like the idea and concept, but when they go all in on the materia before it even shows Cloud's title card, it starts to raise problems.
Honestly, I don't really have much to say as far as the analysis goes. It did exactly what I expected it to, and as far as the materia goes, considering it's a major part of the Final Fantasy VII world, I don't mind it that much.
So, all in all, while the rundowns aren't inherently terrible, to say that they could improve is an understatement. I can't say the same thing about the fight though, I really do like it.
Nice landing, Michelangelo.
Cloud's going on his Sunday drive, as he usually does, to the church, because he needs to thank God again for giving him the ability to send Aerith off into the endless sea while he was standing right on top of it.
Now, to nitpick a bit, I do think it's weird that they hired a voice actor for Cloud, even though he barely says anything. I mean, Machamp had more lines than him.
And then, Link, in the most typical Zelda fashion, storms in on his motorcycle and tries to kill the first person he sees. Holy shit, I thought this was The Legend of Zelda, not The Legend of Grand Theft Auto!
And that actually transitions into probably my biggest issue with the episode's animation. The fact that some of the effects were really, really basic in their execution. Just big glowing orbs and things like that.
You know what else is big and glowing? The remains of Cloud's bike after Link erased it from existence, which leads to the epic elf face plant time Cinco!
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky.
After that, Link partakes in his favorite hobby, property damage.
And then Cloud has a pretty good character moment where he graciously saves the pot from being destroyed, which is later disappears in the next shot, but who cares, that's still a really good scene for Cloud. And it's a nice touch to help contrast with Link's demented nature of just vandalizing people's houses.
So it's okay when Link does it, but when Star does it, it's suddenly a...
Vandalism and genocide are not equivalent at all.
I mean, to be fair, magic was deemed as property. From here we get, honestly, the best bit of the fight, and how they are able to exchange their arsenal and abilities so fluidly, in a way that I wish Lex vs. Zoom did it. Not much talking, just action. And it just really helps pace the fight in a great way.
And then we get a really cool scene of them using their time stops against each other.
That moment right there is honestly my favorite exchange in the entire fight. Just the moment where they are able to soak it in, where they realize, holy shit, he can stop time too. That's rad. Admittedly, this is where the fight begins to not be so good, as the camera angles really just kind of make things all messy and disoriented. But it picks right back up as soon as the purple Link turns into a fairy.
And this is a good time to mention that I think it's pretty neat that they gave each Link their own original personality. The red Link is mostly the aggressor and always has a constant angry look on his face, and the purple Link keeps Cloud occupied as a fairy, constantly annoying him with a bunch of hey, listen, hey!
I hope you memorized their personalities because they're all dead now! From there on out, Link uses his cape of intangibility, and immediately contradicts that by picking up the Master Sword.
I mean, if it was really a cape of intangibility, he wouldn't be able to stand, so let's just give it the benefit of the doubt here.
Link summons his own thunder because I guess getting struck by lightning earlier in the fight gave him the idea, and Cloud immediately reflects that and kills him. That was kinda—
Oh wait, Mipha! Now it's Fierce Deity time.
And then we get this awesome looking shot of the Fierce Deity transformation. And then Link towers over Cloud completely, and then sent flying through a JPEG explosion, and then just completely manhandled through Cloud's limit break.
Well, that's disappointing.
Oh, that's a bit unfortunate, but at least it looks cool.
And I do like the way it's presented, because it's basically the exact opposite of how it ended the first time, where Link was able to intercept every single hit of the limit encounter. Meanwhile, this time, he just got his shit kicked in. That's funny.
And when he tried to counter, Cloud just ignored it.
No thanks, I'm good.
And that's the second time the Triforce has been destroyed in a death battle.
Can we go for the third?
Oh, and the track for this episode was really good. This one you can listen to on its own and it still sounds great, which I can't say for every track this season.
Honestly, Final Breath, hands down, my favorite track of this season overall. I keep coming back to this one, and for the longest time I couldn't figure out why. It's so Final Fantasy driven, and so it doesn't really feel much like a Link vs. Cloud track in its own right. But then you understand where the Zelda references come in, and then suddenly it all makes sense. Final Breath is an amazing song. If you haven't heard it on its own yet, please give it a listen. Please give this episode a watch.
So yeah, this episode coming out does open the door for future remakes.
Batman vs. Cloud 2023!
Mega Flare! Say, fellas, we're getting some pretty good progress on this list of Rudy here. Well, what are we doing now? Alright, let's just take a look here at this totally convenient list that I can just morph into existence. Alright, let's see here. Oh, it's time.
Time for what?
Okay, so the reveal trailer for this matchup was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, everyone thought it was going to be Meta Knight, but lo and behold, it's King Mickey.
With his stupid ass grin.
I will hear none of this slander. This is where I take charge, gentlemen.
And yeah, just for the record, this ultimately got an equal rating to Link vs. Cloud across all of our rankings, but generally speaking, we agreed that Yo vs. King Mickey is a little bit above. Speedy's the only one who disagreed with that.
But don't worry, we were able to convince him with martial law. I'm pretty sure many people will be surprised to see this episode this low, considering that many people consider it their favorite episode of all time, and you know, rightfully so. It has Kingdom Hearts right there in the title. You have good taste, gentlemen, but there are some issues I would like to bring to light before we get to the fight itself. On to the analysis. Woohoo!
So, you see, there is this other character that isn't just Kingdom Hearts in this episode that I would like to talk about. So, Yoda's analysis. It's interesting because it sort of has an, well, I wouldn't say problem, but I think I noticed more with this episode than previous episode. This focused more on the character's story more than any other analysis this entire season, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but it just felt kind of weird. Like when they did that random tangent about Ahsoka and like about the whole world of Star Wars and stuff. Like I love it, I'm a fan of the show, and I do like them talking about it, but it is a little strange. I'm not entirely opposed to this idea, but I feel like it could be done a little bit better.
Oh, and the cutaway of Boomstick setting up Ringmaster to find his dad for Macho Man vs. Kool-Aid Man was
lame and forced. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. Went over the story really well, more better than the entire season, as well as a good balance of versus calcs along with the story bits. It was really well made analysis for Yoda that I quite enjoyed.
Now you know what I think about King Mickey's rundown, the Kingdom Hearts fan? The man who injects the light into my organs. I didn't like it that much. Don't get me wrong, it's a thrill to see them talk about Kingdom Hearts again, and even reference Sora vs. Pit, which is heavily underrated, and I am not chilling. No, I am better than this. But the issue lies is that it kind of has the same thing as Yoda, but they're so vague about Mickey's story that it doesn't really get to go anywhere. They don't talk about anything that he actually does, or who he's even a teacher to. That's like one of the main draws of the matchup, and he never really is established as a teacher in the rundown. He's not established as anything at all, other than being Mickey Mouse, which is really an oversimplification of the character in this series. Yes, this is the body of Michael Theodore Mouse A, but he is a Keyblade Master and has his own character arc and everything. He has his own failures to acknowledge, techniques he uses, all that kind of stuff, and it's just never brought up. It makes the rundowns feel like night and day with how different they are, despite having the relatively same approach, and I just really don't appreciate that much. The jokes are also incredibly hit and miss, because you just have the running gag of, oh, Kingdom Hearts is confusing. No, that's not funny. Well, it was funny the first time, I gotta admit there, but I have to say, Death Battle has some big cojones to say that Kingdom Hearts is confusing, then opens the fight with Yoda crashing into Mickey's heart. Let me explain this setting a bit. Mickey Mouse has a lot of cholesterol issues.
So yeah, this was the first animation of the season, 3D animated by the SFM team and Devil Artemis himself. And ultimately, I think it holds up pretty well. It's not as smooth as some of the other animations we got this season, though. Despite being the first episode of the season, it did show quite a bit, and frankly, it is probably one of the most cinematic death battles that they've done in general.
I do like the amount of respect both get to each other and how it gives off sort of a might squared field, and it just has a lot of positive energy to it, which I do appreciate. But also, it's just absolutely hilarious because of these ridiculous voices and faces. Like, it's a bit hard to take seriously.
You must be...
Like, yes, they do portray the characters correctly, but it's just so inherently funny that I just... the amount of memes that came from this were glorious. But it is still really entertaining and well done.
Alright. Back up a bit. The characterization thing. That's probably the biggest issue I take with this episode. Yes, Yoda's done pretty well, but you see, there's a difference between Mickey Mouse and King Mickey Mouse. As I said so in the analysis portion, but here, this is where it really just kind of takes an issue. Up until the climax, Mickey Mouse just kind of acts like his regular self, which does not really translate well to his character in Kingdom Hearts. He has more of a teacher kind of role, but he also is willing to learn from other people. You get to see that shine in the ending, but for the rest of it, he's just kind of... It's hard to label Mickey Mouse with any one definitive personality, but it does not reflect how he's portrayed in Kingdom Hearts itself. There are a lot of things that isn't portrayed well on the Kingdom Hearts side of things. I already mentioned the setting and how it makes absolutely no sense for Yoda to get here. Throughout most of the fight, Mickey is holding the Keyblade the wrong way. Mickey and Yoda's combat styles should complement each other way more than it actually does, because they both just kind of fly around like fucking rats with wings. You see a bit of that, but for the most part, they don't really get to hop around as much as I'm used to seeing them do. Which I guess can't be helped. There's not much they could jump off of on the flat surface until Yoda decides to crash the spaceship into Mickey's Station of Awakening, completely splitting it in half, which, as far as I know, should give Mickey a heart attack. But apparently he's still going. Okay. When Mickey fires the Ultima at the end of the battle, the light should be coming out of the Keyblade, not out of Mickey. They literally showed how Ultima worked in the rundown, and then they animated it so that it came out of him. Why? There's nothing major in any one of these points on their own, at least not to me. But when it's all piled up, it really does make it feel like that they cared more about Star Wars than Kingdom Hearts when making this fight, which I have no real issue with, but these minor inaccuracies do rub me the wrong way when it's all stacked together right in front of me. But everything else is fucking amazing. The choreography, while lacking a bit in the whole hopping around thing that I know the two for, is still incredible. especially in the swordplay near the beginning, and the exchange where they get disarmed and are able to summon their weapons back. I like how they're able to sneak in references and still feel organic, like it's genuine banter that the two would have against each other. I like how fucking cheesy some of the dialogue is, and I like how dislocated Mickey's face must be if he's rubbing his nose from the upper part instead of the bottom. Or maybe I don't like that last part too much, but still. All this culminates into an experience that Death Battle really hasn't been able to capture for a good while since then, and even before. As Red said, this is more of a cinematic experience compared to other Death Battles, which I do think complements the characters and franchises incredibly well.
That's actually even exemplified by the track for this episode, which I'll just make mention of. It is not necessarily a good listen on its own, but it complements the stuff happening in the fight very well.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you there. On the not good on its own part, Hearts of Light is a fucking bop. It's able to reference Kingdom Hearts and Star Wars in such a well-composed way. It helps that the two have a very similar, distinct sound to them. And it really makes me look forward to any other Kingdom Hearts or Star Wars tracks going forward. Track, dialogue, choreography, all of this is at its peak at the end. So, let me set the stage. Yoda, now high off his ass thanks to ketamine, decides to commit vehicular manslaughter and slams his entire ship down on Mickey. Because, trust in the Force, I must be civilized. Tapakazi, I must.
Then Yoda becomes a Naruto character, summons shadow clones, although they somehow have a tangible effect, which I'm pretty sure isn't a thing, but who cares because it looks awesome. And with the backing track really hitting its high point, making this strangely emotional, with how Yoda says he can't overcome him and Mickey says he can still try. It's just strange that they decided to do it for this episode of all ones, but it really works, and it just leads to a powerful scene of Mickey overcoming Yoda and then Yoda dropping his iconic quote, and then a full force assault with Mickey giving it his all and vaporizing him in one go. And also that neat touch of Yoda smiling and accepting his defeat is just a really great touch and something that adds to this fight a lot.
And the thing about that climax, literally everything up to the point where Yoda decides to float up all the way up until the death, that's all a Kingdom Hearts reference. A reference in fact, and to see that replicated in this fight was just amazing. Everything about this episode, even with the nitpicks I have, is amazing. It really shows just how much the team cares about Kingdom Hearts. With a few things I don't really like in the way, it's not enough to stop this episode from being at least a 9 out of 10 for me.
I will say, as someone who never liked the matchup to begin with, I can't deny that cinematic finale was just peak DB.
Anyways, I have done my job. My metamorphosis is complete. I will return now to my original form.
Wait a minute. You guys do realize that I can also transform with my medallion, right?
You're not important.
Wait, so how did you do that?
I don't know!
He can, like, he made, like, he manifested space, and then there's one quote that can be interpreted as, like, create, but I don't really think that contradicts anything. I think a friend of mine put it best. He can still be making, like, a portal or, like, manifesting already existing space, and he's still technically creating space in the Ceratid that didn't exist there. It wouldn't contradict anything.
We haven't even got to Hex yet.
This match. Naruto and Bleach have quite the history with Death Battle. Naruto has had quite its fair share of episodes on the show, ranging from some of the highest peaks to DB, and others to some varying qualities.
Picky eaters are the worst!
Naruto has come and gone against many franchises over the years.
Mostly gone.
With Naruto being the only survivor. On the other hand, Bleach has only had one other episode in the show, and it was against Naruto. And they lost. And the response was
interesting.
So basically, Naruto and Bleach have a great history of fucking dying.
But there was one more popular Bleach versus Naruto idea, with the antagonists of the series this time, in the form of Madara Aizen, which I myself was pretty neutral on for most of the time, until recently, because of some of my friends who were hooking me up on the idea, and explaining to me the wondrous world of Bleach cosmology for a year or two, which was definitely a great use of my time, and I don't regret a single second of it.
Actually, quite lately, I've been binging a whole lot of the Bleach anime to try to catch myself up to see how well this episode represents the series as a whole.
And here I am, not knowing or caring about either.
I'm on the same boat as Red, because I don't give a flying fuck about these characters.
But hey, let's see how the episode holds up.
I think it's probably the coldest take of the entire video to say that these analysis segments are probably the best of the season, and have a pretty good chance of ranking as one of the best of the entire series, mainly because of how well they're edited, especially from Madara's end. Marvel and DC characters are always known for how well their analysis are edited, making the comic panels look alive whenever they talk about them. Well, it seems they're doing the same for manga now, because Madara has now gained the ability to throw rocks. Trust me, it's way more impressive than it sounds. And the way he's able to transition into abilities through the Rinnegan is just... I like this. I like these editing skills.
Oh yeah, and Boomstick says Big Chungus and the Madara copy pasta. What more could you honestly want? Oh, and Wiz having a breakdown over Naruto lore. Yeah, it is quite the journey, lad. I know the pain.
2 of those are good things. The other, I could go without. You decide which I mean.
And from what I know of Bleach, Aizen's rundown is actually pretty well made. It even includes the jokes that the Bleach community like to make, so you can tell that they at least have a decent understanding of the community and what they're dealing with.
I can definitely say that the backstories for these two just made me feel like Wiz when he was trying to explain the Naruto lore. I don't get it, man. But honestly, everything was just perfectly fine for the most part. I will say that most of the things they went over the episode kind of flew over my head the first few times, because it felt more like cow thumping. With a Yolaton there and a Seilaton there, where everything was just mashed together. Now, I don't have a problem with them dumping cows on me, but when it's about 2 characters I don't really care about, it definitely feels like it's going a bit overboard. Granted, that's partially my fault for not being interested in any of the series, but still, that's just the small issue I had with the analysis, personally. But overall, I still think everything else was fine. While the editing isn't Lex vs. Doom or Batman vs. Iron Man levels, some of the transitions and moving images was still pretty top-notch, all things considered.
And yeah, I can agree that this analysis was one of the best edited that we've seen, and I would actually personally say that it's better than Iron Man, Batman, and Lex Doom, just in the way that everything is meshed together. But that's me. Now we can get into the actual fight.
Aizen is in the middle of getting a lovely tan through a natural means when Madara walks in and decides to ruin his day. You know, by burning him alive.
I can see everything.
Did you see that fire animation loop behind you improperly, Mr. I Can See Everything with your big old purple eyes? Or how about, you know, the many other animation errors in this one fight? It's actually jarring to see just how many errors were in this one compared to other episodes. Normally I need them pointed out to me, but here, they're just around. One shot, Aizen has his wings. The next one, they don't. Madara summons the funny blue man, but at the cost of being paralyzed from the neck down. Looks like Aizen penetrates his nipple. Haha, no, he just phases through the sword because who doesn't? And just say no to getting stabbed. They legally cannot stab you. In the initial sword clash, Aizen just decides to not move his legs. It's just stuck in that one pose. And finally, probably the most minor one, when Aizen turns into his final form and uses one of his little mouth laser attacks, the ball charges on the outside of the mouth, just kind of behind it rather than inside. Again, I don't know why there are so many errors compared to other Sprite episodes, there just are. You could say it's some kind of genjutsu with some imperfections to show you that this is just a simulation going on inside our minds. These two aren't even fighting, they're probably just playing chess right now.
Alright. Let's not get overzealous here.
Well, after the initial preview, which worried me and plenty others about the quality of the episode,
It thankfully picks up right after that.
And look at this. This is god tier right here. Look at this.
I gotta say, excellent use of the staff, even turning it into a crowbar for the added touch of the illusion. It looks jarring, but in reality, this is all part of the plan. This is the wrong video.
In all seriousness, after that initial scuffle of minor errors, it does pick up greatly after that. Madara drops his 10-tailed beast form and transforms with this really cool shot, summons the giant meteor with tons of impact and great sound design behind it, and then just tosses Aizen right through and slices it in half completely. Aizen then transforms himself. They have an amazing scuffle, which, okay, yeah, the frame rate for the dragons coming out is a bit weird, but other than that, it's really good. The Susanoo looks amazing. All the clones fighting the dragons is stellar, and it just looks incredible.
I gotta say though, the music really makes this scene.
Hollow Dreams is a banger. Honestly, probably my favorite track of the season, at least to listen to on its own.
Final Ref may be my favorite track overall, but Hollow Dreams is my favorite lyrical track, and it's not even close.
Then we get to the climax of the fight after Madara and Aizen found out that Big Chungus actually exists. And then we get a fake out with Aizen stabbing Madara in the back and how he was robbed for being the main villain in Naruto. That was absolutely terrible. And vaporizes him completely. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment here and just to say that this completely got me, but not for the reason you're probably thinking. You see, when I was watching the analysis, I'm not really good with numbers, and I legitimately thought they put Aizen higher in AP than Madara until I realized later on that's not what happened. But I didn't think of that at the time, and I was extremely worried that Aizen was going to win. But thankfully that wasn't the case, and that fake out really helped add to it a lot, for me personally. And that made me really, really happy.
Oh, look at that, Bleach fans. You almost had a win there.
The one thing that might diminish that fake out a little bit over time for me is realizing that that was the first actual illusion that Madara used in the fight. He had broken out of an illusion previously, but if you actually noticed, it becomes pretty obvious that Madara hasn't used his mainstay ability yet.
Personally, for me, the reason why the fake out didn't get me as much was because, well, these two are Masters of Illusions, so I knew there was already going to be a fake out at the end. And when I saw Aizen's quote-unquote death, I just knew Madara was just fucking with him the entire time. Kind of loses the impact, but hey, it was pretty neat regardless.
And after Aizen can't handle the balls in his jaw, Madara decides to look over his, quite frankly, very excessive fireworks show, which is probably one of my favorite ending shots in a death battle, probably of all time.
Very reminiscent of another episode this season, though.
And then there's the post-analysis, which is pretty good. It focuses more on abilities rather than stats, because they're dead even. Something that is an extreme rarity nowadays. Mostly because it either goes they're 3 Novum Decillion times faster, or 385 Duo Decillion times stronger. And yet they still say it's somehow a close match. Here it's actually justified because stats are dead even. While I am a little bummed that it could have been as long as, like, say, Naruto Ichigo's post-analysis, I'm still happy with what we got. Though a more detailed ending analysis would have been much appreciated for how close and complicated this was. I should know better than anyone.
But hey, look at that, Death Battle. You beat 1 Minute Melee to something. Seriously, 1 Minute Melee. It's been 3 years. Where's the fucking episode?
And yeah, a solid episode overall, and hey, Madara finally broke the losing streak for Naruto. Just at the cost of another Bleach hell. Sorry, Bleach fans. We all know you really want to win, but you just didn't get it here.
And you never will.
Nice view, huh? Fuck you!
It should have been called Poe versus Iron Fist. Iron Fist versus Poe is cursed and it feels wrong.
So yeah, when this matchup got revealed, it was a big shock to pretty much everyone, mostly because this is a relatively recently popular match, and also not one that is massively mainstream. for example, our Discord servers all saw this, it was really gratifying. And it's also the first animated film character in the show as well, which is pretty cool.
Out of all the episodes in the 16-episode season, Poe vs. Iron Fist always felt like it deserves that spot because of the legacy it holds, not just as a matchup, but as the characters it shows, as Red said. And in terms of public perception, this one has always seemed to be a favorite among them. But as time goes on, not many people really talk about it these days. Now let me explain why that's a sin.
The analysis for this one is pretty solid. Editing is on point, as expected with basically every comic book character now. It's some really good edits and transition and going over Iron Fist's stories pretty well. And Poe is also just really entertaining, but it's also just so wild to see him talk about a DreamWorks character. And it does give me a sense of nostalgia since I watched these movies a lot when I was younger. Hearing them name drop all these characters is so strange. But no Tai Lung name drop is very disappointing. That's gonna knock off several points off this episode.
If we'd already made that joke, fuck off.
And also that gives me a little bit of hope. We might even see Megamind versus Gru. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
Shut up.
A+ for not showing any clips of the Iron Fist show.
If I had to give points to anything else, it's that Poe's analysis really treats him with respect. It treats the entire franchise with respect. But most importantly, I really do like how they take a dive into his character and how he grows as a person, much in the same way they did with Yoda. But to an extent, I argue that Poe's analysis does it better. It doesn't make it so that the stats are completely taken out of the equation and it just solely focuses on the story for too long. Here it has a better balance, and I really do appreciate that. The cutaway gags, however, are probably the most boring in the show's history. And that's about all I can make of that.
Lotus clap! Man, I killed him. And it wasn't even on purpose!
So, this fight was another 2D animation, and the voice actors for it were really good. They got a Jack Black impersonator so good that for a second, people were actually wondering if they got the man himself.
How did they make that post bright also is that Jack Black?
Poe's VA in the teaser sounds so damn identical to Jack Black.
I got to ask, did Death Battle actually get Jack?
Holy shit, is that the guy from Jagblinski Games?
But that's it for it. But nope, it's just the guy who voiced Ultron in Ultron vs. Sigma.
Sprites are pretty solid, Poe's really expressive, Iron Fist looks good as well, and overall it just has a very good, clean aesthetic.
I've heard a couple complaints here and there that this episode wasn't 3D, since Poe is a 3D character, and most people are 3D, I would imagine so. I can't speak from experience. You see, I am literally a round, sweet man. The sprites are already really expressive, and the 3D backgrounds do their job well enough. I'd argue that the 3D models would have a much harder time being able to emote properly, because, well, Yo Dicky had that problem. And the difference between the quality of Poe's models in the actual high-budget DreamWorks films, and what we would be able to have in the actual battle would be night and day, and would be seen as jarring at the very least.
You know, it's rare that we see custom sprites that look almost as good as the normal sprites they use for characters. I mean, look at Poe. It almost looks like it could be like something you could download off of Mugen, especially standing right next to Iron Fist, who, well, is a Mugen character, but, you know.
Actually, Danny is a Marvel character.
As far as the actual fight goes, it was structured similarly to probably a fight scene you would see in a Kung Fu Panda movie. Most people, from what I've seen, view that as a good thing, although it definitely makes it feel a lot different from any other fight this season.
Aside from probably Yo Dicky, because both of those fights definitely have a more cinematic approach to them, despite being in different animated styles. It's all about the narrative. So let's talk about the fight itself. The battle opens up and Danny is already fighting the voices in his head and losing. Poe walks in on that and assumes it's training, and because a man is punching the air, he just has to talk about how awesome it is. And from this and this alone, Danny sees this as enough to call himself the Dragon Warrior. So Poe challenges him to a friendly spar, and of course Danny replies with hitting Poe hard enough to make him gasp for air. From here, the fight is just fun. Things are smooth for the majority of the shots, and the way Poe is able to overcome the adversity facing his way against someone who actually has better experience than him is just really funny, especially with the way he uses the dumpling analogy in this fight. And then Danny fires a big fuck-off cannon beam thing, which causes Poe to fall down the stairs and probably think about his life choices leading up to this moment. After Poe breaks his fall of bamboo sticks, we are met with what is probably the highlight of the fight up till the climax, the bamboo bit.
For some reason, the frame rate takes a hit during this segment, but it is really fun to watch. Shows a little bit of strategy out of both of them, and ends with the whooshy finger hold.
Spoiler for the post-analysis, they mentioned that Danny had a really big advantage when it came to their movement and reaction speed. And that shows in this animation. This episode portrayed the speed advantage for Danny pretty well, and also the durability advantage for Poe very well.
When you actually look at the scene with the whooshy finger hold, you can see Iron Fist escaping Poe's grip over and over again, just showing how much faster he is, and throughout the fight, you see Poe almost no-sell some attacks from Danny. It just has a really good way of portraying the differences between the two.
Poe takes Danny to the spirit realm, which looks amazing, and they have a brief scuffle, and Danny is still able to hold his own even when blinded, and does a high-impact one-inch punch that hurls him throughout the entire realm. And then Poe responds by going into his incredible-looking dragon stage, saying his iconic line, and then Danny responds by turning into an extreme version of Sans Undertale, which is the closest we'll get to him in Death Battle, and then throws his own dragon against him, and they have a brief but stunning hand-drawn dragon bout in the sky, but Poe manages to scrape by, consuming his dragon, and then slowly... Okay, so this is kind of like the only major issue with the episode right at the end, where Poe just approaches Danny slightly faster than normal, and just evaporates him with one shot. Okay. But then he names drops Shifu and has a quirky line.
That was so cool! Wait till Master Shifu hears about this!
And then it ends.
He's so happy about murder.
On that note, I see lots of people taking issue with this last line in particular, acting like Poe is just absolutely ecstatic that he took a man's life. No, that wasn't the intention at all. Poe wasn't happy that he killed someone, he was happy that he got a fight that made him go all out. He just really wanted to talk to someone about it because he just likes fighting and talking about fighting. This doesn't seem too out of the ordinary.
Anyway, that point aside, the track for this episode really helps elevate it and really compounds on that and makes it feel like you're watching a scene from one of the Kung Fu Panda movies.
Except they were able to actually give Poe and Iron Fist an equal amount of respect and the spotlight, which many people weren't expecting, considering that Poe just has such a dynamic presence. But Iron Fist was still able to hold his own both in animation in a fight and in banter, interactions, personality. They both feel like equals to one another in the sense of a combat scenario and as a character themselves. Something I really appreciate. And the combination of all the stuff that I really do like about this episode, even with the boring cutaways, is what really gave it my personal bronze medal. More than episodes I was really expecting to be higher up, which we'll get to in a moment.
I really enjoy this episode a lot. It captures the feeling and scope of Kung Fu Panda to a T, with very good character interactions and music that just all make it feel like Kung Fu Panda, which me, as a big fan of Poe, I was always going to get a kick out of. And no, Poe being in the episode wasn't going to make me like it regardless, because I've already had another one of my favorite characters happen in this season, and I wasn't that big on it.
Hyper, you and I are friends, right? Like, friends.
Yeah.
Then I hope you understand that this is constructive criticism when I ask you to get some fucking original material and not just quote other people when they review other Death Battles.
What? How dare you accuse me of such a thing? We just happen to share similar opinions, and I just so happen to express them in a similar manner. That's all there is to it.
Death Battle fans, the original challenge, literally impossible.
Dragon Ball's never gonna lose again, is it?
Piccolo versus Martian Manhunter.
They actually will never lose again.
Sorry, was that important?
So you see, when I first heard about what the episode could be, I was being teased by Phantom in DMs, hey, it could be Cole versus Alex, and I just kindly told her to shut up.
This is why Phantom's my best friend.
Remember when you said that Martian Manhunter versus Piccolo would end the Dragon Ball win streak, Speedy? It was Thawne, Speedy. He would end the Dragon Ball win streak and make everyone salty!
Anyway, I probably should explain myself since I had this in fucking 6th. But I guess we should focus on the matchup itself, and how it has the unanimous top 3 opinion across the board to pretty much everyone else in the community. Which completely goes without saying, once you see the episode, you understand why it's so popular.
This episode caught a lot of people off guard with its announcement, and that's because it was pushed by a lot of the researchers because they really wanted the match, and they were really hoping to get it on the show, and they managed to pull it off in a spectacular fashion.
In another timeline, this would have been Goku Black versus Bizarro. Just saying.
Get out.
Oh boy, oh boy. Where do I even start with this matchup when it was first revealed? Because, well, nobody saw this coming. I mean, you have a matchup that only recently got popular just suddenly showing up after Batman vs. Iron Man. And boy, oh boy, was I pleasantly surprised. And unlike Korra vs. Storm, where the matchup really didn't have much legacy, Dragon Ball vs. DC is enough to make this episode a legacy by itself. Now, the analysis for both of these two. Well, what can you say that hasn't already been said about Goku Black?
You guys wanted to know why I have this as a personal ranking at number 6 for the most part? This is why. Aside from the pacing being a fucking car wreck, the analysis is more or less just a calc drop upon calc drop upon calc drop, and for the most part, I'm just not interested. People already think that Dragon Ball Super is an incredibly mixed bag among the Dragon Ball franchise, and this analysis does not do this series any favors, especially for Goku Black himself as a character. We don't really get to hear much of his motivations other than he hates mortals, which, you know what, granted, that's really all there was to it, but I would have at least liked a bit more, if that makes any sense. Other than just, oh, Zamasu is a racist. Here's his stats.
Now, to be fair, when you have a character that doesn't have nearly as much history as Reverse Flash, things are gonna feel a little bit barren, all things considered.
Even then, it still feels a bit lackluster. Thawne Stones is pretty good.
We learn about his history with Barry, how petty he is, and just how much of a yandere he is for Barry himself. Even though it wasn't that long since we saw Wally on the show, I'm so glad they didn't just reuse feats and just apply them to Thawne himself. Because that's something I feel like Death Battle always do with similar characters nowadays when it comes to the analysis. But everything is really well explained when it comes to Thawne and his abilities. The negative speed force, the fact that he can just age you to death, and, well, just all the pettiness, you know? That's what makes this episode so good, in my opinion.
Ah yes, his best ability. Pettiness. But no, honestly, it did a pretty good job of setting up Thawne. And I do agree that Black's analysis was a little bit more underwhelming, but I actually don't see much issue with it. It did not bore me, it did not feel really out of place next to Thawne's. That's why this one actually placed a little bit higher for me than for the other guys.
And that's per comic book matchups nowadays. The editing is just beautiful. I mean, I heard one of the shots took Nick like 2 hours to make. And that just shows how much commitment it takes to make these edits.
So then we get to the fight, and it starts out perfectly. Reverse Flash has a flashback to the good old times of Barry versus Quicksilver.
Alright, Flash, so you're fast. But I'm stronger and smarter.
As he reminisces the time, he completely ruined Barry's reputation by putting that statue in front of Quicksilver. Just perfect.
On a blank newspaper.
Anyways, then Goku Black drops in, just vibing with his teacup, which is perfect. Although I do kind of wish Reverse Flash had the teacup as well. But we still got one of them, so I'm fine with it. Anyways, he starts acting all cocky and just murders a bunch of folks. And then Reverse Flash takes issue with this and decides to be a petty schmuck. And it's made all the more better by the fact that they got the man who did the original It Was Me Barry meme, who just kills it as Reverse Flash. He completely steals the show with having the best line reads, he has a killer performance, and just sells his petty attitude so well.
Honestly, Valentine does a better Reverse Flash voice than any of the official voice actors, which I find really funny.
Meanwhile, Goku Black is British. 0 out of 10.
Why didn't they get Masako X? Why didn't they get Masako X?
Black's VA also does a pretty good job as well. Anyways, Reverse Flash decides he's the only one who can pull off the teacup well, so he destroys Goku Black's teacup in a petty act and initiates the fight. And throughout, he's just dodging Ki Blast, and also goes out of his way to use one of the animators' OC as a human shield.
Throughout the beginning of the fight, Reverse Flash is literally just toying with Goku Black.
Even to the point where he can phase through Goku Black's attacks just by standing still. And with someone as egotistical as Zamasu, him showing off the color of his hair as soon as he actually gets a hit in and transforms seems really good in the characterization department. And I think that's one of the main things that makes this episode work. Characterization, and how well they interact with each other. Madara vs. Aizen got close, but the lack of banter for the most part that was cut from the storyboard does drag it down a bit. That's not really a problem here. You get a good blend of banter and action that you would expect from people this petty and egotistical.
Anyways, the first chance Goku Black has when he has an advantage, she just casually punches Reverse Flash through the earth and all the way to the moon, and then punches him all the way back down through them again. And it just looks amazing. And this was like the first time it really hit me with how well they've incorporated 3D environments with the 2D sprites, and it really just blew me away the first time when I saw it. Anyways, for some reason, Goku Black changes sprites in the next shot for some weird reason, but I don't even care because he follows it up with a big old Kamehameha blast, which feels so impactful, and Reverse Flash just dopes out of there and messes with the laws of reality and attempts to go back to an earlier moment in the fight.
But then, as Thawne is going to kill Goku Black in the past, Black says, "Oh hey, I can do that too!"
And we now get to the best part of the episode. Murder. So much murder.
Yeah, since they're both immune to time paradoxes, they both go back in time repeatedly, just killing each other, to no avail. But they just keep going.
Fucking Reverse Flash turning Goku Black into a donut and exploding him. Fucking Goku Black chopping Reverse Flash in half right in front of him. Goku Black using a surprise Kamehameha right in his face.
And he was reading the morning paper. Why do you have to do that?
Because it was blank and he hates that just as much as I do.
Reverse Flash jumping behind Goku Black and making him not feel so good anymore. And then we get to the best step of the whole battle. Reverse Flash was the one responsible for Quicksilver's death. Oh my goodness!
He literally said that in the beginning of the fight. Were you not fucking paying attention? Was the blank newspaper distracting you too?
Gumball, the blank newspaper is not this big of a deal!
Newspaper aside, there's actually a good bit of character animation during this moment of them just killing each other. Goku Black is only able to kill Reverse Flash when he catches him off guard, and because of his cocky and stubborn attitude, he thinks if he just kills him a bunch of times, he'll just win eventually. While Reverse Flash is able to just kill him during an attack because he's stronger, and he's trying to figure out why he can't kill him. It's a fun dynamic that has so much care and love put into it. Especially when during that same scene with the Quicksilver death, the "It Was Me" line in the track actually plays there. You can tell a lot of these neat details throughout the fight, and I won't point them all out, but it just adds to this so much more.
Speaking of the track...
Yeah, honestly, this track is really, really good. It's definitely one of my favorites, too.
Same here.
It's really cool, and still funny, how they managed to work the meme into this song so seamlessly.
I do think this is one of the best tracks Death Battle has done, but I do have to acknowledge that the lyrics are pretty short. There's not as much going on in this track as there are in other ones. And quite honestly, there doesn't really need to be. You can completely understand what it's like just from hearing the chorus. Short but sweet. But the track is anything but sweet because, my god, it slaps harder than I did to my...
They go back into the Speed Force one last time, and you have a really cool interaction between them. Both have really great quotes. And my favorite visual from the fight is this scene where Reverse Flash just punches Goku Black multiple times, just running in a straight line.
And then Goku Black gets the upper hand. But as it turns out, Reverse Flash is a sneaky little bastard because he took the time ring under Zamasu's nose.
And then Reverse Flash makes a really cool, smug-looking grin, which I really enjoyed on a first viewing, but now I'm completely sick of because people memed it to the point where I'm sick of seeing that face every time, and I just associate it with the memes.
Let's race to Japan.
After Thawne makes that face, Goku Black gets penetrated. But not in a good way.
After that, Reverse Flash decides he's kind enough to take Goku Black on the world tour around the globe in 80 days. So many times, and the only thing that's left of his face is, well, and it is worth noting that Goku Black is still in his Super Saiyan Rose form, which has been confirmed to be intentional, which means that Goku Black was still alive during all of that. And then Reverse Flash decides to yield into the sun, Thor versus Raiden style. With one last quip, Reverse Flash just gets the fuck out of there because he apparently doomed the entire planet or something. And for all the positives I have on this episode, I do admit there are some things that holds me back a little bit. First of all, the sprite inconsistencies. Several points during the fight itself, you can see Goku Black's sprite change between his C2 sprite and the one that they actually used for the majority of the episode. During the part where Goku Black just fires at Dawn, you can see that Dawn's sprite changes a few times. And also, I wasn't a big fan of the post-analysis.
While I didn't care that much personally, it is a bit weird how they implied Goku Black is stronger because of how the White Dwarf Star isn't as impressive as his feats, but then later go, oh yeah, Reverse Flash just AP stomps completely. Like, that first part should have been just cut completely. I don't know why that was there.
And to give them credit, they didn't mention him countering a multiversal collapse. But they also said that Goku Black was stronger, so it gives a lot of mixed messages in that regard.
And ultimately, while the episode is far from bad, it's personally one of my favorites. It's just those small little nitpicks that just drags it down a bit.
I wonder where Thawne went after the end of that.
Probably told you to bury some more or something.
I mean, literally what else does he do? That's kind of his whole deal. Honestly, I'm not sure he has much else going on in his life other than just this one very specific niche thing. And other than that, his life is just kind of meaningless. Oh, wait.
Last entry, we talked about an evil man who mainly wears yellow, fucks with time, and also has an undying hatred / hard-on for the person they keep torturing. So in this entry, we're talking about an evil man who mainly wears yellow, fucks with time, and also has an undying hatred / hard-on for the person they keep— wait a minute.
What the hell are you? A real fucking vampire.
Wait a fucking second, did I read the script wrong? Let's see, both wear yellow, both have time powers, both are absolute meme lords. Oh my god. How did they get away with using the same character twice in a single season? They haven't done that since Charizard. Jokes aside, this is one of the matchups that's been confirmed for quite a good while now. Is it because it's good from a thematic appeal?
It's just because Liam wants to chill out Dio versus Alucard as much as possible.
You know what? After this, he's earned it.
But no, honestly, it's a pretty good matchup. It's not the most thematic match, but it's definitely not bad in that department either. And after seeing the episode itself, oh, it was definitely a lot of fun.
I will say that I do quite like Dio from how much I've seen from him from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Alucard seems cool, I guess. I didn't really have any stake in this match. I just thought, oh, it's neat, I guess it's just happening. And then it happened, and yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I don't know if you could tell by all of our high placements.
As someone who has been wanting JoJo back since Season 5, this was just the best thing we could have gotten. Jotaro vs Kenshiro was alright enough, but Dio vs Alucard, it's on a completely different league altogether.
And yeah, I'm the only person who actually preferred Goku Black vs Reverse Flash to this, keeping it from sweeping the number 2 slots. But regardless, I can definitely see all the effort that went into this.
Now, before we go into the nitty-gritty of everything, it is worth noting that Liam, a really big JoJo fan, has done most of the writing for this episode. And it definitely shows. He's extremely passionate about Dio and JoJo as a whole. We get to see some of Dio's backstory. Pennin is shown in full detail with him burning a fucking dog alive. Yeah, that's a great introduction. They cover pretty much everything. From his stand, from his Rodarola!
Until Boomstick is rightfully smacked by Wiz, as he should.
Again, you can tell Liam is writing this episode.
And you can also tell he feels no remorse for the souls that he absolutely crushes.
Though, there is one downside to Dio's analysis, and that's
the biggest fucking spoiler Death Battle has ever done. Say what you will about the age of the manga, and for the most part I can agree. but a Netflix dub of the show was coming out in literal weeks compared to when this episode was released. This was absolutely horrible timing, and I fucking think it's hilarious.
It's not like they needed the spoiler in there, but why not? Why not?
Alucard's rundown is also pretty good. His arsenal and abilities are explained very thoroughly, which I do think was pretty important for them to do, given how hyped up Alucard was. But what I really do like, and much in the same vein as Poe from his rundown, was how Alucard's story was handled. To compare it to another rundown of this season, I'd like to compare it to Yoda, because in how they handled the execution of their story and character arc feels like night and day. With Yoda's, it just took up so much of the rundown that it felt more like a character bio than a particular rundown of an analysis that really explains how he fights and all that kind of stuff. Here, Alucard's weapons and abilities are mentioned alongside his story as it progressively gives off more feats seamlessly with a bit of jokes and still manages to keep me entertained and well versed onto who Alucard is.
Now it's worth mentioning that they did something rather unique with the analysis for Alucard in this episode. Instead of starting with the backstory for Alucard immediately, they save it for later, which is honestly kind of refreshing and unique in this case.
It actually gives the feeling of the series rather than I can actually compare to something like Steven Universe, where they basically spoil a decent bit of the backstory right at the beginning. The way Alucard's is portrayed actually emulates the story and how it is shared in the series.
And the closing statement for Alucard's analysis is also just incredible. They explicitly call out how he hates monsters who reject their humanity, and I like how they draw that connection between Alucard to Dio.
Yeah, it's cool how they actually show that Alucard and Dio are the antithesis to one another.
Combined with how well edited this rundown is, as well as Dio's, this gave me a really great first impression of Alucard, to the point where I'm kind of rooting for him. Here's how he dies. The fight opens up on a beautiful day in London, which is an oxymoron because London has never been beautiful. A car goes by, and Alucard, with his silly itchy trigger finger, decides to shoot a flat tire into it and watches it explode. Dio disposes of Mai Shinori's body as Sakurai instructed.
Then we have an exchange between the two, and then the fight begins. And I like this bit of character animation that they mentioned in the analysis, where they explicitly point out that Alucard doesn't dodge attacks, and in the fight, he doesn't dodge any of Dio's attacks, neither his punches or knives, and he just keeps relentlessly shooting him, while Dio, because of his greater speed, just keeps dodging him the whole time.
Dio decides to call on his inner Britishness, quickly decides to go to the nearest knife shop, and make Alucard look like Swiss cheese. Now, a cool little detail is that if you look in the background when Dio uses the time stop to get the knives, we can actually see the glass breaking in the store window, which is a nice little indicator that, Dio doesn't normally have knives on him. And then we get the famous Dio meme.
You thought you'd triumph, but it was I!
Then we get this incredible hand-drawn section of Dio turning back to seeing level 1 Alucard, which looks incredible, which shows Alucard as a terrifying monster, and Dio who still tries to act arrogant despite being very terrified of his opponent.
Dio then decides to use the most overused joke in the whole JoJo fandom.
Then Alucard summons the giant blood river, enters level 0, and it leads into one of my many favorite shots in the fight. It just looks incredible with the swirling, the sky turning red, just the overall effect and atmosphere. It just looks great. I was stunned when I first saw this.
We get to debatably the best part of the fight, Dio and the world fighting them off. It's also pretty neat that we get a scene of Dio actually holding his own against the zombies without the world's help.
Then we get the absolute standout shot for most people, Alucard actually transforming into Dracula, which I wasn't expecting, and Taka delivers the one line everyone was hoping that would be referenced from Hell's Gate Abridged, and it was pulled off masterfully.
Then he decides to not be Dracula anymore, because...
budget.
Yeah.
Thanks to Dio being covered in blood, and Alucard being a blood bender, he fucking yeets him into the clock tower and has all his zombie minions go after him.
Dio launches himself up onto the top of the clock tower, to which the wave of zombies follows him somehow. So then, you actually have basically a sword fight with the hands of the clock tower. It's probably the jankiest part of the fight. The frame rate of the two hands of the clock tower does not actually match up with the sprite animation on top of it. It doesn't look awful, though.
You'll see the zombies coming at him, and he's just like, well, fuck that, and jumps off the fucking clock handle.
The two are struggling in the air, and then Alucard gets another cool line to just blast Dio through the head, which is awesome.
But you think that stops Dio? Fuck that. He just freezes Alucard's arms solid. But you think that's gonna stop Alucard? Nah, he just rips off his own arms and turns them into blade. Having the scariest face in the entire season. I mean, the details on that face. Ugh, it's terrifying.
And then there's the horde of zombies behind Alucard, which is absolutely over-excessive, and I love it.
Dio decides he has no other options than to use some Worldo! He freezes time, decides to drink some of Alucard's blood for good measure, and uses his eyelasers to wipe out Alucard's entire army in one go, including Alucard himself. The only thing that's left of Alucard is the heart. Time resumes, and, well...
And then we get into just what is absolutely my favorite part of the episode. Dio and Alucard both worn out and just come at each other with full force with all they've had left. And it should be noted that during this entire scene, the music and VAs are on full point here. And I'll briefly mention the track here. The track, while it is good at setting atmosphere through most of the fight and has some good catchy moments here and there, this point here is where the track really goes in and just pulls all the stops and really sending in a heart-pounding climax for both of these two. And the VAs are absolutely on point, giving the best lines throughout the entire fight. Dio launching from the floor and erupting from the ground, asking for the Vampire King to give him one last challenge, and Alucard flies into the air and delivers what is absolutely my favorite line throughout the entire fight. And this line right here, the Bird of Hermes shot, captures everything that's about Alucard himself as a character. I don't remember the exact specifics, but a friend told me this once, and this exact quote basically just tells you everything there is about Alucard as a character, and that is some insane attention to detail. And Taka pulls off the line absolutely perfectly. They both rushed at each other with one last full force. Alucard even creating a giant fist and a storm is just going crazy in the background. Dio giving it all with all of his energy with the VA behind him, giving it everything, and then...
Dio teleports right behind Alucard, launching a bunch of Mudas right into Alucard's face. Eventually, with one final blow, finishing off the Vampire King for good. Dio then lets out one final victory scheme, probably making all the neighbors in his vicinity.
If they're somehow still asleep. And also the JoJo end card. Can't forget that.
Now, for the post-analysis. They pretty much countered all the main arguments for Alucard winning.
It's kind of cool, actually, because prior to the episode coming out, I saw more people say that Alucard would win, but it seems like they presented their data in a convincing enough way that they swayed that same majority.
And unlike Ben vs. Hell, for example, all the vital information wasn't just stuck into black boxes at the top of the screen. They just presented it fairly well and explicit, and that's something I really do appreciate about this analysis.
To call this episode a 10 out of 10 just isn't doing it justice. That being said, there are a couple of things that kind of hold this episode back from being number one for me. Other than, number one being number one. First and foremost, the frame rate kind of drags a bit at the clock tower segment as previously mentioned, but also when Dio says that he wants to rule the world. It's a bit jarring. It does kind of throw me off a bit. Also, I've heard that Alucard's voice lines, as good as they were, most of them were either directly ripped from the show or reference abridged. In terms of original banter, there's not much going on for him. And lastly, and probably the most minor, in the Bird of Hermes line, the lip syncing's all for Alucard. Stuff this minimal doesn't matter in the long run, but it is slightly enough to push it down to the silver medal, because number one is just that good.
Yeah, while those issues are there, I honestly just don't really care because this was such a phenomenal episode that blew me away in almost every regard. And I just want to say this up front, while I do like some of the higher up episodes in my own personal list, this dwarfs them all by a humongous margin, and this is in my top 10 episodes of all time. I was not expecting to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Just the animation, the analysis, the presentation, the voice actors especially. Major shoutouts to Takahata as Alucard, and an even bigger shoutout to Tom Shulk's Dio, one of the best performances in all of DB. They sell all their lines perfectly, and it's just a treat to watch throughout the entire time.
Everything is worked together beautifully, and there's so many neat details I always notice every time I rewatch it. Like all the little smoke effects in the background during the intro, the zombies who are burning alive when Dio punches himself back up into the air, the storm moving when Alucard makes the giant fist about to clash with Dio. Just all those little things just add so much more to it. It's an incredible episode, and definitely an episode I'd say Swan pulled off masterfully and should be very proud of for a match I could definitely tell he was very passionate for.
Now, honestly, I'm the biggest JoJo fan here, I would say, but I have some small minor issues. One, I do think the zombie sprites are a little bit jarring, they look a bit generic, and well, we've seen them back in Leon vs. Frank. I do wish, honestly, they could have used some other sprites.
I feel like they even could have just recolored these sprites, and it would have looked a little bit less out of place.
Another thing that irks me a bit is that they didn't get Antfish back as Dio, which is funny because he actually voiced Macho Man, the episode that came right before this one. It would have been a great Team 4-star reunion. Antfish himself does a pretty decent Dio, all things considered. I can't deny, Tom Schalk as Dio was just a really good replacement.
And Tom Schalk's Dio really does remind me of why I do love JoJo as much as I do, and always keep going back to it every now and then.
Hyper, it took you 1 year to get to part 2. What the fuck are you talking about?
Listen, it was one time, okay?
We still haven't finished part 4 yet.
Hey, we'll finish it eventually.
So, up to this point, we have not agreed unanimously on any episode's placement. Partially because of me. But anyway, this is the one exception to that rule.
That's all I can stand, 'cause I can't stand no more. I never thought it would happen. A serious fight. I found it! This is the feeling I've been looking for!
Honestly, ask yourself, did you think for a single moment that this wasn't gonna be number 1? Yeah, Dio card's cool and all. Yeah, Goku Black Burst Flash is cool and all. Yeah, it's literally cheating, I know, but like, can you blame us?
I know that there are probably going to be a select few people that say that this is the boring pick, or this is the popular opinion, why could you be more direct? Because the popular opinion is right, god damn it. Remember when I said that Dio vs. Alucard had a couple of reasons for not being number 1? Well, this was the fucking biggest one, and I'm not even going to hide it.
Yeah, you see, for the longest time, Dio vs. Alucard was just number 1 on all of our lists, and we were pretty confident that that wasn't gonna change.
Except mine!
And as for the finale, well, for once this season, we had no idea going into it. So by the time Madara vs. Aizen came out, not many were sure on what it was gonna be. Then comes the trailer, and... let me just say that it's absolutely hilarious that they just play serious music over Saitama footage and don't even attempt to change it at all when they show clips of Popeye. Anyways, yeah, that was the funniest reveal all season, but also, oh my god, I cannot believe this happened. A lot of people didn't believe it, actually, because no one expected this. Who expected this? Especially for the 10-year finale.
I expected Saitama, but I did not expect Popeye of all characters.
And this reveal did not necessarily get many people happy.
That isn't to say nobody was looking forward to it, because there were a good amount, but there were also an equal amount that weren't very fond of this idea happening.
If you ever wanted to see a community completely ripped in half and then reattach itself seconds later, you show them this trailer.
Now, a lot of people, including me, were expecting Saitama to be done at the end of his series. Ben himself said he wouldn't do Saitama until his series was finished, which is why we got Tatsumaki and Genos beforehand. But I guess they went back on their word then.
And honestly, that might even be a purposeful way to bring it all back around, because we started this with them going back on their word with Yoda and Mickey, and now Saitama to round it out.
But before we get into the analysis, fight, all that, I do want to say that probably out of all of the characters in this season, with a few exceptions here and there, these two might actually be the ones that I have the most emotional attachment to. One Punch Man, I think, was the anime that really got me onto anime as a genre. I liked it here and there, and I really enjoyed the Fairy Tail manga. But it was One Punch Man that kind of cemented that yes, this was the style of animation that I liked the most. And, pretty simply enough, I grew up with Popeye. A whole lot of VHS tapes that are probably still rotting in a storage unit somewhere, just full of those classic cartoons. That real sense of nostalgia. So while initially I was kind of upset with the finale at first, after letting it sink in and take a look at the characters that they're using, honestly, I didn't have any complaints. And I feel like that sentiment is shared with a lot of people because the backlash, or I guess rather disappointment of the community did not last long at all.
And yeah, I am in a similar boat in that, well, I don't have any attachment to Popeye. I do quite like Saitama a bit, and I was not a fan of this matchup happening at all, especially for a finale. Honestly thought it was just kind of a waste. But I was talking to some people and hearing about it some more and thinking, I guess it could have some merit, but I just couldn't see this idea working well at all in the slightest. But I was curious to see what direction they were going with for this episode because for once for an episode, they barely showed anything about it. Like, the finale was hardly talked about. All they did was just tell us the VAs and show us the analysis preview, and that's it. We didn't even get a sneak peek or anything, so we knew very little going into it, which kind of made me a little hype. I even went out of my way to avoid the track as well, just to see what this fight would bring in the most blind way possible.
With all that being said, let's talk about the analysis.
Saitama's analysis just kind of tickles me. First of all, I didn't expect this day to come. I don't think any of us did. At least, not for a good while. But the way they just kind of unenthusiastically talk about how Saitama one-shots everything, it doesn't come off as disrespectful, because that's the joke. He one-shots everything, so it kind of makes watching his fights kind of boring. At least when he starts throwing punches. That's the whole point of the character. And the way it's reflected in the analysis itself just kind of feels faithful to the source material, rather than flat out insulting or saying they don't like Saitama himself. They still show great interest in his exercise routine, which they put a lot of stress on, because let's be honest with ourselves, outside of scaling, Saitama doesn't really have much to go with other than direct feats, which he has a fair bit, mind you, but Saitama himself rarely fights in comparison to other characters in One Punch Man. So his analysis did seem a bit stretched, but that's not really at the fault of Death Battle here. More so that Saitama doesn't get too much time to get into action, because by the time he does, the fight's over.
As it stands, the way they portray Saitama here is really good.
Popeye's rundown also tickles me. Probably much harder this time, to the point where I'm going to die. Popeye is immediately glorified as one of the pioneers of animation, and it doesn't feel like they favor one over the other here. This is the kind of respect that Popeye deserves. Once you ignore all the racist stuff he did in the past, there's actually a bit of Popeye that many people don't know about. And in some ways, Death Battle was able to bring that up and still seamlessly talk about him as a character. It's a good balance. I do like how they were able to stress what it meant to be a classic cartoon character of the time, and just how ridiculous his feats can go. But from there, things just kind of get more and more crazy.
Death Battle themselves haven't really done that many Toon Force characters, so this was a great opportunity to explore that part of the character even more. Personally, I do really like when Death Battle just goes over these wacky and crazy feats. It just makes the experience just more and more fun. Popeye's analysis also introduces something we haven't seen in Death Battle for a while. Food calcs.
The last time we did a food calc like this was actually Mob versus Tatsumaki. A funny coincidence there.
And honestly, that goes into something else I like about the analysis for Popeye. Even the serious stuff is just done in a really well entertaining manner. Nothing is taken too seriously. Even the serious stuff is usually just something really dumb. And that's just something I always like about Death Battle as a whole. Just researching these wacky feats and just see how much they actually come out to. I can definitely say that Popeye's analysis just kept me entertained all the way through.
And I do like the parallel between Saitama and Popeye's analysis, between how Saitama focuses on exercising to gain his power, while Popeye focuses on healthy eating to gain his power. It's an interesting parallel that I never really thought of, but I kind of dig it. And them going into the benefits of exercising and healthy eating just kind of gave me a sense of, like, nostalgia. Back when they used to compare these real-life events or attributes that relate to the character and they actually go in depth about them. I don't know, I feel like I hadn't seen that in a long time in Death Battle, and it was very welcoming to see. It didn't feel distracting and flowed in well with the rest of it. And yeah, overall I really enjoyed the analysis. All of us, in fact. But let's get into what really ranked this episode as high as it did for us and for many other people.
So this fight starts basically the only way it could. Saitama is out on the town, looking to pick up some affordable groceries, and comes across overpriced spinach branded under Popeye's name. But the second he says anything bad about Popeye's spinach, Popeye wills himself into existence and smacks him in the face for it. Saitama, still not really taking it very seriously, just nonchalantly agrees to the fight.
Saitama really doesn't seem like he gives a shit, and just stands there and takes the hit, which is totally in character for him. Popeye knocks him out of the store, and then casually just puts the store back together after knocking it down.
And now's a good time to mention that Popeye's VA does a pretty good job, and oh my gosh, it is Swan himself.
He wasn't content researching your characters into the ground, so now he's going to throw hands himself.
He needs the blood on his hands.
Well, not this time, because Saitama throws a full-on death punch on Popeye and completely one-shots him. Huh, how about that?
Then you see a bunch of random sailor trinkets fall to the ground that definitely weren't on Popeye's person, but cartoons.
But then we get this really subtle but nice moment for Saitama where he just looks at his fist disappointed that he can't find a good challenge, which is some really good foreshadowing later on.
And by later on, I mean right now, because look what just fell into his hand.
It's spinach, oh no! Mercury!
Popeye eats the spinach and has this fun little transformation sequence with original music. No steel. Donut.
And now the fight is finally starting!
Right off the bat, you can already tell that this episode's going to be a fun one, because within the first 2 hits, they already demolished each other's testicles. Like true bros.
This is some of the best hand-drawn stuff they've done in Death Battle in general, and I will stand by that until they up their game again.
The two punch so fast that their arms become barely visible, but you can still make out how Popeye turns his arms into weights. Meanwhile, Saitama does this thing called get slightly more serious.
He has the angry eyes now.
Which leads to him emulating NetherRealm Studios by attacking a lot while standing still, and then Saitama unleashes slightly more serious than normal punch.
Which Popeye really just sells that rubber hose and oh god, we're in sprites. Okay then.
Now, if you did actually listen to the track beforehand, you will notice that there was actually an 8-bit segment, so that kind of spoiled the surprise. But regardless, this is still pretty good.
I did it, and I'm very happy I did that, because god, this was such a huge surprise when I saw it.
This is why you don't listen to the track first.
The custom rigs for both look great, they're very expressive and fluid, and I just love how it goes full retro style with its 16-bit and emulating the sound effects and all. It's just a really cool scene.
The sprite segment is a little bit short-lived, but it is really nice to look at.
Anyways, Popeye copies Luffy's move from One Piece and does a Gear 3rd fist attack, and Saitama responds with his own fist, and they break back into reality, back into the hand-drawn section.
And you get one of the coolest shots in this whole thing. Saitama just doing a serious table flip on what is probably even deeper than the crust of the earth, but let's not worry about it.
And this attack was serious enough to make Popeye open up his other eye. Popeye gets slammed through the giant crust of the planet, only for things to turn 3D now, and oh my god, an SAP has breached containment.
No, that's just Giga that Popeye.
I will say that it was a bit weird for them to hype up Devil Artemis when he already works for DB, but also I don't care because this Popeye model is the greatest thing I have ever seen, and this got quite the reaction from us.
This is literally.
Wait, wait, hold on.
Look at the Popeye model.
Wait.
Oh my god. It's Popeye, but real. It's Popeye. What is going on?
So now you have another epic clash between them, similar to the start.
Now that we're in the 3D segment, I want to mention how well the expressions look on Saitama, because we've already seen that model before when he threw hands with Superman that 1DBX. And the expressions on Saitama's face are night and day. This is such a massive improvement. And in choreography, it just kind of kills anything that would want you coming back to that DBX.
And they have this massive clash, similar to the beginning of the fight, where you get the massive Aura collision between the two.
Saitama punches Popeye incredibly hard, but Popeye immediately responds with "fuck off" and punches Saitama so hard that the goddamn planet explodes.
And I will say, while I still do quite enjoy Hulk vs. Broly, the planet blowing up here has more impact than from the two muscle jocks that are Hulk and Broly, which kind of baffles me.
And ultimately, simplicity is key, in my opinion. That's why this one manages to have more impact than the really detailed animation in Hulk vs. Broly. All the pieces of the planet flying off. You don't need any of that. Big kaboom, all you need is a big flash of light to make it really feel powerful. Devil Artemis knows that.
And then he just threw in a shit-eating grin, just for kicks.
And then the face that Popeye makes right here after he blows up the planet is one of the greatest things I have ever seen ever, with just the music contemplating it and the whole chorus and everything with the fire of the planet blowing up and the wind and everything in his face. I was just speechless the whole time, and I love it.
Then Saitama, in the wreckage of the burning planet, just gets super serious, goes in for another death punch, which, you might not like that. It's a recycle, but they did it just so they could give us the funniest joke in this episode. Death meets spinach.
Oh yeah, and also, special note to Popeye's spinach kanji being way more detailed and threatening than Akuma's ranging demon kanji. I don't even know how that happened, but it did, and I kinda love it.
Amazing! This is amazing! How did you get so strong?
A little bit of mercury.
And after all the chaos that was unraveled, everything is silent. Just a white screen, a faint sketch of what appears to be a circle, and Saitama landing. Everything comes back into view, and we just get time to let it all sink in.
This actually highlights the track. The track really fits this fight so well. We already talked about the 8-bit segment, but just overall, like the guitar riff for the 3D segment, just everything about it is really bombastic and high impact.
Then maybe we should probably call it by its name for once. It's Balderdash. It's called Balderdash.
And then now's a good time to mention Saitama's VA. Yeah, early in the fight he was very casual, not very into it, as you would expect, but then throughout the fight he gets more and more serious and more into the fight, and his VA really does a great work. But this right here, as he gives an emotional speech about finally finding the opponent worthy for him, and to actually push him and finally find a challenge again for once in his life, he just absolutely nails it perfectly and complements the scene so well. And another thing that I want to note here that I'm not sure that many people notice is just how many parallels this has between, well, the very first season finale with Goku vs. Superman, and how they mention at the beginning of the fight, East versus West, and how it also parallels the finale with Saitama jumping off a planet and Popeye jumping off the sun. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it just complements the scene even more. It just adds to such an emotional climax.
I just think it's neat. Saitama finally having found the one person in his life that could actually give him a challenge, and the reason to go all out, decides to do one last all-out serious punch. Popeye is ready to do the same, but instead of taking it seriously, he's just tired of this and just wants to end it quickly. And with that, we get the biggest fist clash in the entire season. Everything goes white, there's a brief moment of just silence, and, well, Saitama's hand starts to crack, and from it, light emanates. And he promptly explodes like a DBC villain.
Better than...
Camera returns back to Earth, and we now see Popeye falling from the sky. Popeye then notices a bunch of eggs falling from the sky. Popeye then grabs one of the eggs out of the air, and we now see that it has Saitama's face on it. The One Punch Man has now turned into several One Punch eggs. And with that, Popeye lets out his iconic ending tune to end off the season.
You know, for being the season finale, the post-analysis for this one, pretty straightforward. Not that it's a bad thing. I'm not really sure how you can paint this out to be, well, you see, if Saitama punched a little bit harder, he would still, no, he would die.
Yeah, there's not much to comment on with this. They reinforce the fact that Saitama does not have the magical ability to kill anyone in one punch, but rather it's just that he is that much more powerful than anything else in his series.
And yeah, that was the episode, and yeah, is there really any question as to why this is all of our favorites this season? or hell, for a lot of peoples. I have not seen a single person say they dislike it, and for the majority of the people, it's either their favorite of the season or favorite of all time, which I'm inclined to agree. It does a lot of things that not a lot of episodes do often, and it really tries its best to stick out and really tries to push itself to be something special, and it is. It gives an amazing analysis on both. It does an amazing fight scene, having changing animation styles in between the episode, and it all looks great. Their first use of hand-drawn animation mixed in with 3D elements and environments that makes it just look stunning. And probably most importantly to me, having a character evolve past what their series has already placed them, and having it feel natural in this episode is more than what I could have asked for. I wasn't sure if they could pull it off for someone as goofy or quirky as Popeye, but they did it for Saitama, and I was very happy to see that. And yeah, I have no issue saying this is my favorite of the season. And my favorite episode of all time? I'd say it's tied at the moment for me, but it's definitely close. I'll have to think on that more. But that's still quite the accomplishment, and I'm very happy the season left at such a strong note.
My final thoughts on this episode in particular. This is a really well-crafted episode just because of how they managed to give Saitama a good amount of credit without buying into any of the no-limit fallacies that come with his character sometimes. Not to mention the actual animation managed to somehow portray action, comedy, and just emotional tension all in one package, which I actually don't think I can say about any other death battle that we've had. It's all wrapped up really nicely with a little bow on top. It just really feels special.
I'm not even sure if I want to make a joke to close this episode off, because in reality, I don't think that's what this episode deserves. It has my utmost respect as an episode and as a product. I cannot recommend it enough. Please go watch it if you haven't already.
I don't think it would be bold of me to say that this is probably the best Saitama animation on the entire internet. Usually with most Saitama fights, they mostly follow the same structure. Saitama finally finds someone who can survive on his punches, but still he mostly manhandles them, all things considered. I feel like it's kind of a redundant formula at this point. But Death Battle, however, does something different. It actually gives him a challenge, and they show him actually struggling. It's not just the whole, oh, he could still one-punch these guys, he just isn't trying. He actually puts in the effort, and that's something that I really appreciate about this Death Battle. As my fellow commentator said, they actually have some emotion and character development for Saitama. And it isn't just the same joke of Saitama still managing to hold back even after finding someone who can survive his punches. It actually is an even fight for him, and that's something I greatly appreciate, and I haven't really seen anyone do before. With that said, I can definitely say that this is my favorite episode of the season, and also my favorite Saitama animation of all time.
And yeah, just to wrap this up, unlike the other ones, this did also reveal the characters for the next season, and we had some mixed results on our guesses.
You told me it was gonna be us, or And yeah, that was our ranking of the season, and it was a pretty damn good one. It was a massive step up from their last season, which, I mean, naturally, yeah, there were a lot of complications due to, well, a lot of reasons because of last year.
The demonetization word.
It was definitely a huge step up for the team, with better uses of puppet animation, which I honestly couldn't even tell half the time, and uses and mixes of 3D environments, which I've started to notice more and more recently, and just the general quality of it improving overall, and having some of my favorite episodes of all time. This is a season that made a lot of my friends happy, and yeah, I really enjoyed it overall. Definitely one of my favorites, and possibly favorite season? I'm still thinking about that, but it's definitely up there.
I can definitely agree with that. Frankly, this season had probably the highest quality as far as its animation and its editing in terms of analysis and just in general.
This being the anniversary season, they really knocked it out of the park. Some of the matchups we've been wanting to see for a while, and I can definitely say they did a banging job. I wouldn't say it's my favorite season, but it's still really high up there. And I'll say, I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for next season.
I want to give a huge thank you to the Death Battle team and the animators, because throughout the entire decade that Death Battle has been around, they have made so much stuff that I could call probably my favorite videos on YouTube, period. Even if the stuff that they make isn't something I always like, the good definitely outweighs the bad, and I cannot recommend this show enough. If for some godforsaken reason you clicked on this video without having seen a single episode.
And watched to the end.
For those weird 4 individuals, probably 4, named, you know what, that sounds like something a Nathan would do.
Nathan, Trevor, Julie, and Andrew. I see you, Andrew. I see you!
Well, this was real fun. What do you say we do this again sometime?
No, we're not doing this again. I swear, this was way too much work.
Anyways, what do you guys think? Do you want to see more of these types of videos? Leave a comment below and let us know.
And ignore the voices. They'll tell you things you don't want to hear.
Oh yeah, and also, another thing that you may have noticed, or may have not, I secretly plugged a bunch of my A and B shots throughout this entire ranking, graciously. So, if you want to check out the full thing, it's somewhere linked around the screen or in the description, somewhere, anywhere. Check it out, please. It literally took me a month.
If you like this video, leave a like. If you dislike the video, leave a dislike. Either way, we'll see you guys in the next video, and be sure to lock your windows.
When everything I see no matter what I believe, I'm aiming high.